Long Bai's broken talon cracks under the heavenly wolf's fang, and the deep sea barrier trembles with shockwaves that could shatter gods. Kai Waiao's scheme has finally turned the Dragon Monarch's rage into a trap he walked into himself. Leave a like and subscribe to see who burns their blood next. God Realm, a pure white light was circulating slowly around the eternal heaven pearl, but it was clearly dimmer than it was a few days ago. Standing guard faithfully and tirelessly around it were the three Yama ancestors. It had been many days since Yun Qi and Shui Meiyan had gone in, but they hadn't lost their concentration for even an instant. The front of the central hall was filled with people. Even now, a great number of profound practitioners were flying over at top speed. It was because the Devil Queen had sent out a critical alert order. Soon, every essential profound practitioner of the Devil race, the God Emperor, and the sea gods of 10 directions deep sea realm were present. The Devil Queen stepped out into the open, and everyone focused their eyes on her. Considering the situation, whatever she was going to announce must be of the greatest importance. First, I would like to thank everyone for carrying out the Devil Master's order and preparing for the all-out assault against the Dragon God realm. Even as she spoke, her devil soul informed her that the World Dragon City had been activated, and that it was approaching them at a level of speed that couldn't even be described as speed anymore. Whatever pipe dream she might have had before, it was mercilessly crushed by the sight of the vessel leaping from one space to another with every passing instant. Even so, she didn't allow her voice or her expression to waver in the slightest. The only visible change in her appearance was that her normally invasive charm was a tad weaker than before. But, she sighed audibly as she said this, I regret to say this, but the situation has changed, and not for the better. Everyone held their breath at the same time. For 1,000,000 years, we, the Northern Region Devil race, have been forced to hide in the darkness like rats under the oppression of the 3 divine regions. Then, against all odds, you shattered the chains that bound us for so long that they almost felt like a part of us, and returned our will to this world once more. Make no mistake, you all of you are the pride of the Northern Divine Region and the Devil race. No matter how dark our future may become, you will always be praised as the generation who made the impossible possible. You will always be the eternal flame of hope that keeps our future generations going. For now, though, this is where our journey must come to an end. It sounded like Kai Waiao was praising their outstanding achievements, but no one felt good about it for obvious reasons. Something was deeply wrong here. Your Majesty, Fendeaki took the initiative to broach the subject. What happened? Please speak clearly. It is thanks to the Devil Master and you that we've come this far, and we will bravely follow you too even to the ends of the world. Kai Waiao shot him a glance before saying, Your bravery was never in question. It is I who have committed a grave blunder. I recently discovered that I've completely underestimated the Dragon God realm and the Western Divine Region's strength. A small commotion broke out, but Kai Waiao's next words silenced it immediately. We are not in familiar territory, but I'm sure that some of you have heard of the Dragon God realm's recent movements. First, Long Bai has returned earlier than expected. Second, not only did the Dragon Monarch not underestimate us, he issued a most ruthless order, one that rendered all the psychological attacks we have accrued against the Western Divine Region so far useless. Not only has the Dragon Monarch conscripted every divine master of the 5 king realms into his army, he has recalled every dragon god, dragon sovereign, and master dragon as well. In total, there are over 800 divine masters in the Dragon God realm right now. It is a force we cannot ever hope to fight directly. Not only that, 5 hidden powers who are at least as strong as Crimson Destruction Dragon God himself have emerged. Suppose that I have a plan that could deal with 800 divine masters. These 5 dragon gods turned even that flimsy hope into nothing. Not far away, a frowning Kaianai Yinger had to restrain herself from interrupting Kai Waiao. She should be giving assurances to the people right now, not tell them the whole truth and spread despair even more. What in the world was she thinking? At this point, every devil person's expression had taken a turn for the worst. They felt as if the Devil Queen had poured a bucket of ice water over their fighting spirit, extinguishing it in an instant. A surprised Yan Xianxia implored urgently, Your Majesty, are you saying that we should? Retreat, yes. Kai Waiao's hard gaze swept across the people as she continued. All realms are to organize an immediate retreat as soon as this meeting is over. In half an hour at most, you are to organize the men into your respective profound arcs. scatter in all directions, and escape to the northern divine region at top speed. Clamor, clamor, forget the rest of the devil people. Even the Yama devils, the witches, and the moon eaters could scarcely believe their ears. Wait, most people didn't have the authority to question the devil queen's orders, but the Yama emperor did. Frowning deeply and speaking in an even deeper tone, he asked, "Why the urgency? Half an hour is just too much," Kaiwao replied, "because the enemy will descend upon us in 2 hours at most." Kaiwao hadn't changed her tone, but the listeners felt like they were struck by lightning anyway. The western divine region would hit them in 2 hours. Naturally, everyone's first thought was that the Devil Queen's claim was impossible. Before they could voice their accusations, though, Kaiwao waved her arm and brought up a projection. It was the image she spied through Zhou Zuzi's soul. In the projection, they saw a floating city with many terrifying, profound practitioners in it, especially the gray or white figures standing at the center of it all. Their weight was enough to stifle their breath even through a projection. That wasn't the scariest thing, however. It was the fact that the space outside the floating city was changing by the instant, and that it didn't look like it was flying at all. No, it looked like the floating city was leaping across dimensions itself. At the same time, a completely unfamiliar term called spatial jump popped into everyone's mind. "What is that?" Xianxia exclaimed in shock. "This is a live projection I conjured from a spy I planted in the western divine region. What you're seeing is what is happening right now," Kaiwao said. "The Dragon God realm calls this floating city the World Dragon City. It is a profound ship. The Dragon God realm has hidden from the other realms until now. It is an inheritance of the ancient dragon gods, and it contains the power of the world piercer in it. You should understand now that I was neither lying nor exaggerating when I said that they will arrive in 2 hours at most. We were hoping to catch the Dragon God realm by surprise, but it turned out that the Dragon God realm was harboring the same thoughts as us. Worse, their plan was more ruthless, devious, and sudden than ours. Doubt, shock, panic. Every emotion erupted at this moment. Not only that, the sea gods and divine envoys of 10 Directions' deep sea realm were staring at their master, Kang Shishin, as well. The god emperor was furrowing his brows and brooding like a dark cloud, but he chose to keep his silence for now. The king realms of the western divine region had come together as one. The hidden dragon gods had returned to the world, and their destination was none other than the 10 Directions' deep sea realm. If a battle truly took place here, it would be no exaggeration to claim that the very realm they were standing on would shatter into dust. Buzz Yan Xianxia waved his hands and created a buzz that shook everyone's ears and eliminated all the noise. Then he asked solemnly, "Has the Devil Master agreed to this?" The Devil Queen shook her head at first, but stopped herself midway and nodded slowly. "There's no need to hide anything now, I suppose." She moved out of the way and revealed the sealed entrance to the central hall. It was surrounded by 7 flowing barriers. "Earlier, I told you all that the Devil Master has entered secluded cultivation after chancing upon a breakthrough opportunity. The truth is, he found the way to use the Eternal Heaven Pearl and activate the Eternal Heaven Divine Realm. Right now, he is cultivating inside it." There was practically no one who didn't know that the Eternal Heaven Pearl was in Yun Qi's hands. Kaina Yinger shot Kaiwao another incredulous look. Why did she reveal this as well? Kaina Yinger didn't understand what it meant to exchange honesty with honesty in the face of death. Her wits and ruthlessness might be surpassed by no one, but her ability to control the will of the people was ultimately far below Kaiwao's. "Is it not possible to enter or exit the Eternal Heaven Divine Realm freely?" Yan Tianxiao asked. Kaiwao shook her head before replying. "The Eternal Heaven Divine Realm is a world with its own independent laws. It is completely separate from the real world, meaning that the Devil Master has no way of knowing what is going on right now. There is no way to send a message to him either. Moreover, external disruption is absolutely forbidden after the Eternal Heaven Pearl is activated. Otherwise, the Eternal Heaven Divine Realm may collapse, and in the worst-case scenario, the Devil Master himself may die with it." Yan Tianxiao's expression grew solemn. "How much longer will the Devil Master be cultivating inside the Eternal Heaven Divine Realm?" 2 days, Kaiwao said indifferently. "The Devil Master is the Devil Emperor reincarnate, and he's capable of creating miracles no matter the situation. This time, though fate isn't on our side, we must retreat." "But," Fen Dayaki sucked in a deep breath before asking, "what happens to the Devil Master if we retreat now? I understand that the Eternal Heaven Pearl mustn't be disrupted, but is it possible to transfer it to a profound arc, using the gentlest means we can think of? Kai Weiao fell silent for a moment before sidestepping the question. Worry not, I shall protect him myself. Your duty is to leave immediately. We have already dilly-dallied for too long. The meaning behind her words became clear. The commotion turned into deathly silence once more. You are saying that we can retreat, but the Devil Master cannot. But that means, Kai Weiao said, it is a terrible choice, but it is also the only choice we have. Without the Devil Master, any battle waged against the Western Divine Region can only end in complete annihilation. If we leave now, we will still have hope and a future. She swept her gaze across the crowd again before frowning suddenly. What else are you people waiting for? We only have 2 hours left. We cannot afford to waste a single moment. Leave and make preparations for the retreat now. And no, a young man's cry suddenly cut through the air. It was Tian Guhu with a distorted expression on his face. We can never leave the Devil Master behind. Kai Weiao glared at him. Are you going to die for nothing then? You have already created history. You have already earned more than enough glory. Right now, retreating is the wisest and only choice we have. As long as we escape back to the Northern Divine Region, as long as we stay alive, there is always hope to make a comeback. This is not the time to be acting emotionally. Without the Devil Master, we wouldn't have forged the era of devils, however short it may be. Without the Devil Master, we wouldn't be creating any history. Without the Devil Master, we wouldn't even have the strength to set foot on this land right now. Tian Guhu's face was red, and his voice was shivering. We may not survive at this last hurdle, but at least we would have shown that we are penned animals of the Northern Divine Region no longer. It was our ancestors' long-cherished wish to look down on our oppressors and savor their fear. The one who truly forged this era and miracle isn't us, but the Devil Master. We are just lucky devils who got to enjoy the shadows cast by his darkness. With that in mind, I can never leave the Devil Master to face the Western Divine Region himself. This is an order. Kai Weiao's voice grew severe. Forgive me, but that is one order I will not obey. Tian Guhu dropped to his knees, but his determination was unwavering. If I somehow survive this crisis, you may punish me however you wish. But the only way you're making me abandon the Devil Master in a time of crisis is to execute me. Kai Weiao remained frowning, but her voice softened a bit as she explained patiently, Tian Guhu, I am not blind to your loyalty. However, while it makes sense for me, the wife of the Devil Master to live and die with him, you are different. Your life and strength should be devoted to the survival of the Northern Divine Region. You don't deserve to die a worthless death for the Devil Master. I must disagree, Your Majesty, Tian Guhu replied without hesitation. Starting now on, Guhu of Tian swears to spill all his blood and power only for the Devil Master. His words caused ears to ring, hearts to race, and souls to shiver. Well said, my son. Tian Mui, the Imperial Heaven Realm King, roared as he stood next to Tian Guhu. His subsequent declaration shook the ground itself. That we are standing on this soil and basking in its sun is already a favor we may never repay in a lifetime. To leave the Devil Master to die while we escape, the guilt would haunt me until I die. If our war against the heavens must end here, so be it. We will simply entrust our duty to the next generation. But today, Imperial Heaven Realm King Tian Muyi will fight for the Devil Master with all his power. He even turned around and shouted, Men of my Imperial Heaven Realm, heed my call. This upcoming battle is a battle of no return. This battle is fought in the name of the Devil Master and the Devil Master only. All those who wish to leave may board the Imperial Heaven ship and leave now. If you manage to return to the Northern Divine Region, I trust you to become the guide and hope of our future generations. Remember, no one will stop you, and no one will scorn you for making this choice. As for those who wish to fight for the Devil Master, stand behind my back right now. A scene that shocked every 10 Directions Deep Sea Realm profound practitioner present, and even Kaianai Yinger happened. Every Imperial Heaven Realm profound practitioner had moved behind Tian Mui and Tian Guhu like they had practiced this their whole life. Not one person had chosen to escape this fight. For, the most stunning thing of them all wasn't even that they had all chosen to protect the Devil Master to their deaths. It was that not a single one of them had hesitated when they made the choice. It meant that the choice wasn't a product of intimidation or persuasion. It was something they truly believed from the bottom of their hearts. Considering that it had been stated time and time again that staying behind was practically a death sentence, it was an unbelievable outcome. It was at this moment Yan Xianxia spoke up. All Yama devils, Yama ghosts, Yama guards, and Yama soldiers, heed my call. Those who wish to stay behind and fight for the Devil Master, you will prepare for battle right now. But know that there is almost no chance you will witness the dawn of another day, and that all our struggles may just amount to a bit more time for our Devil Master. All those who wish to leave, you will engrave this generation of Yama devils and Northern Divine region into the souls of our future generations. You will also be responsible for ensuring the continuation and reinvigoration of the Yama devil bloodline. He fell silent, and again, not a single profound practitioner of the Yama devil realm chose to leave. Xianxia turned around to look at his people. His heart boiled something fierce when he saw the panic on their faces turning into unyielding determination. He, it looks like everyone is of the same mind. Fen-Deaki chuckled as he turned around to look at the Moon Eaters one by one. When the Burning Moon God Emperor perished at the hands of the Devil Master, the Burning Moon Realm couldn't deny that they felt humiliation, reluctance, and even hatred toward the Devil Master. But today, darkness has broken out of its prison, and the light of the Devil shines bright in the sky. These few months of freedom were short, but every moment was a moment our ancestors dared not even dream of. Those old grudges seem so insignificant compared to what we have today. If only for the respect and admiration in my heart, I, Fen-Deaki, am fully willing to give my life for the Devil Master. Fen-Deaki had spoken in a calm and peaceful tone, and yet his determination seeped into everyone's hearts like water anyway. There were no regrets. 1,000,000 lifetimes will not be able to repay the fact that the Devil Master has brought us all here today. It is our turn to fight for the Devil Master. A Moon Eater roared at the top of his lungs. Unlike the Imperial Heaven Realm, the Yama Devil Realm and the Burning Moon Realm were king realms, and yet not a single person had chosen to retreat. This scene shocked the profound practitioners of the 10 Directions Deep Sea Realm so badly that one of the sea gods said in a hushed voice, "This has to be a setup, right?" "Of course it is. There's just no way." Another sea god echoed the sentiment. As members of a king realm themselves, they knew better than anyone there was nothing a king realm feared more than to lose their lineage. It was because they could ill afford to lose their cultivation and their status in most circumstances, much less on a hopeless undertaking like this. In that sense, it would be apt to describe the divine masters of a king realm as the biggest cowards in the entire world. Kang Shishin still didn't say anything. His twitching eyebrows were the only visible reaction on his face. "That's right, it's time we fight for the Devil Master." A roar overwhelmed the sea god's hidden jeers in an instant. Not only did the Devil Master give us new life, he pulled the Northern Divine region from the brink of extinction. That is a kindness even 100 generations will be hard-pressed to repay. If we are to abandon him now and escape ourselves, how will we ever be able to face ourselves? What would be the difference between us and those dogshit animals who backstabbed the Devil Master when he saved the world? I haven't planned to return alive from the moment I stepped out of the Northern Divine region, much less partake in the conquering of the Eastern Divine region and Southern Divine region with my own arms and legs. I have no more regrets in this life. I will gladly die 1,000,000 times for the Devil Master. Hu Tianxing, the desolate Calamity Realm king, spoke coolly, but his eyes looked like burning coal. Dying and ending my lineage here may bring shame to my ancestors, but I'm sure they'd be even more ashamed if I were to abandon the Devil Master now for a moment of living. He patted his proudest son on his shoulder. "Huinger, from this moment onward, we will fight not for desolate Calamity Realm, nor the Northern Divine region. We fight only for the Devil Master. Are you afraid?" "I am." The desolate Calamity Prince nodded once before shaking his head slowly. When he looked up again, his eyes burned with never-before-seen determination. "But if it's for the Devil Master, then not even 10 times the fear is enough to make me take a single step backward." He turned around, raised his arms, and shouted like thunder. "Men of the desolate Calamity Realm, we have already created miracles and witnessed history being made under the Devil Master's leadership. Do we have any more regrets? No. Then today we die for the Devil Master." Blood poured into the desolate Calamity Realm profound practitioners' heads, and both their faces and their eyes turned as red as fire. Together they shouted, "We die for the Devil Master." The chant was supposed to come from the profound practitioners of the desolate Calamity Realm only, but somehow it woke something from the devil people's hearts and caused them to shout, "We die for the Devil Master! We die for the Devil Master!" Like a spark that started an inferno, the chant spread to every corner of the central hall, the palace, and even the god realm itself. Soon even the sky itself was shaking from the war cry, "We die for the Devil Master! We die for the Devil Master!" Every northern region devil person was roaring at the top of their lungs. Every shout only affirmed their determination and raised their fire even further. Their fists were clenched, their auras were rising. Before they knew it, the fear, panic, and despair that had sapped their strength like ice earlier were gone like they had never existed. All that was left in their eyes and on their faces was the blazing will to fight. The war cry might have happened inside the deep-sea God realm, but the profound practitioners outside the God realm were shaken by it as well. It was just like that day they stepped out of the northern divine region together, the day their wills became united as one. This time, though, not only did the devil people come together faster than before, their unity exceeded even that time. The choice should have been as clear as day. One was a retreat that only a complete idiot would consider to be humiliating, and the other a death trap with no return. And yet every devil person of every king realm, upper star realm, and middle star realm who weren't even qualified to participate in this battle at all choose not to retreat. Even Kyanai Yinger couldn't believe her own eyes for a very long time. In her original estimate, they should be thanking their lucky stars if they managed to persuade even half of the devil people to stay. After all, it really was the point of no return. Again and again, she scanned Kai Waiao. Again and again, she confirmed that the Devil Queen hadn't been using her devilish powers at all. In fact, she had purposely kept her charm to a minimum. What the? The sea gods and divine envoys stared at the devil people in disbelief. Words couldn't begin to describe the shock in their hearts. Each and every one of these people, especially those that belonged to upper star realms or higher, bore the heavy responsibility of continuing their lineage and guiding the future generations. And yet they had chosen to die instead of abandoning their devil master. This couldn't even be described as loyalty anymore. To the devil people, the devil master had become a faith that could never be sullied or abandoned. Suddenly, a different kind of emotion started overcoming their shock and disbelief. The screams of the devil people suddenly felt unbearably accusatory for some reason. It was then they realized that emotion was shame, thanks to a certain scene being broadcasted to the entire world through the eternal heaven projection. There was no one who didn't know that the God Emperors had chosen to repay Yun Qi's act of saving the world with the greatest betrayal. It was an eternal stain that not even time could wash away. On the other hand, the sinful, filthy, and intolerable devil people showed in the simplest and most stunning manner what it truly meant to repay a favor with death. Their eyes unwittingly met one another. They immediately looked down and felt that shame growing even more. For the first time, the rulemakers and the kings of the God realm were forced to reevaluate their idea of the term devil people. It was at this moment Kang Shishin finally broke his silence and murmured to himself, "What beautiful unity, what enviable loyalty! There is nothing in the world more luxurious than this." "What do we do, my lord?" the closest sea god to him asked in a low voice. "It will be too late if we wait any longer," another sea god said. Kang Shishin shot Kai Waiao a look. Sensing his unconcealed gaze, the devil queen simply faced toward him, nodded, and looked back at the devil people as if it was just a normal exchange of gestures. There was no icy warning or subtle threats that he could sense at all. "Heh, what an impressive woman. No wonder she is crowned the devil queen of the northern divine region." Kang Shishin muttered something no one understood with a complex expression on his face. Meanwhile, the 6-star gods arrived beside Keijai. Their leader, Aster the heavenly jade star god, said to her, "Princess, if you leave, we leave. If you stay, we stay." Keijai shot them a look before looking at the central hall where Yun Qi was. Her aura bubbled restlessly as if she couldn't wait to head into battle. That was all the response they needed. On the other hand, the Brahma Kings and Brahma Monarch divine envoys were considerably more perplexed than they were. They sent Guju a sound transmission asking, "What should we do, Mentor Gu?" "We stay," Guju replied indifferently. "The young miss will be angry if you withdraw." Both the Brahma Kings and the divine envoys had to stifle a sigh. "Sigh, our poor, pitiful Brahma Monarch realm. When will our tribulations end?" Finally, Kai Waiao said in a soft voice that somehow still made itself heard, "Please calm yourselves and think carefully. The core of the northern divine region is here. What future will we have if you are all dead?" "Enough, your majesty," Yan Xianxia waved her off. "Our hands are ours, our legs are ours, and the same goes for our lives and power. We have made our decision, and not even you can change our minds now. Your Majesty, let us waste no more time on this and move on to the war preparations, shall we?" Fen Deaki said seriously. The Western divine region is powerful beyond imagination. But the Devil Master himself is the Devil Emperor incarnate and a man of miracles. With our bodies and your intelligence, we may just be able to stall out the enemy long enough for the Devil Master to return. Once the Devil Master exits the eternal Heaven Pearl, we will pave the way with our bodies and deliver the Devil Master to safety. As long the Devil Master survives, the flames of hope of the Northern Divine Region will never die. Fendeyaki's words struck a chord in the masses' hearts and caused them to roar again. "That's right," Tianguhu shouted loudly. "Please believe in us, Your Majesty. We will not die uselessly until the last drop of our blood falls. We will defend the Devil Master until he returns." Kai Waiao stared at the crowd for a very long time until finally she let out a heavy sigh. "Very well then, we will defend the Devil Master with every drop of our power." The Devil people abruptly fell silent, and they clenched their fists until the veins looked like they would burst. Every living being naturally feared death. But if that fear was surpassed by faith, it would transform into the greatest fuel that filled every vein in one's body with fire. Kai Waiao raised her hand and declared her first order with unquestionable authority. "All realms, return to your positions, ready your weapons and profound artifacts, and gather your strength to peak form. God Emperor Shishin, activate the deep sea barrier now and evacuate as many profound practitioners outside the deep sea God realm as you are able. This is an all-out defense battle, so no one is to exit the barrier without orders, much less launch an assault on their own. All divine masters are to return to this place and assemble in 45 minutes. Everyone who isn't a divine master should stand by your profound artifacts and formations and be ready to operate them at a moment's notice." A long chain of orders later, the Northern region's profound practitioners finally dispersed completely to carry out their orders. A drastic change came over the 10 Directions deep sea realm. After that, Kai Waiao passed through the barrier and entered the central hall. She ordered the 3 Yama ancestors, Yan 1, Yan 2, Yan 3, follow me. For now, there is no need to guard this place. Kai and Yinger walked in just in time to hear this. She immediately frowned and voiced her disagreement. "Wait, you can mobilize anyone you want, but not them." The 3 Yama ancestors' necks shrank in unison when they heard Kai and Yinger's words. "I know what you're worried about," Kai Waiao said, "but they are the greatest power we possess right now. I'm going to need them to face down the Dragon Monarch." Kai and Yinger frowned slightly. "You're going to," she cut herself off midway and still shook her head. "That's still unacceptable. There must be at least one person guarding him." "All right," Kai Waiao relented. "Yan 3, you may stay. Again, no matter what happens in the future, you mustn't allow anyone or anything to touch this place, understand?" "Yes," replied Yan 3. Kai and Yinger spoke again. "No, leave Yan 1 here." "Let's both take a step back, shall we?" Kai Waiao shot her a helpless look. "Yan 2, you stay behind to protect the Devil Master. Yan 1, Yan 3, the 2 of you will follow me." "Yes, yes." Yan 2 accepted his orders and returned to his seat. This time, Kai and Yinger finally kept quiet. Yan 1 and 3 were the only ones who looked sad. "Kai Waiao, you are amazing," said Kai and Yinger with a complicated expression. "I must admit that I hadn't expected this outcome at all." However, Kai Waiao shook her head and said, "No, I already told you that I am not as capable as you think. I didn't compel them to want to die for the Devil Master. Their will is entirely their own. All I did was to bring it out into the open. Besides," Kai Waiao smiled as her eyes turned distant, "it is what he deserves. Don't you think that the price is too high, though? This may be the death of the core of the Northern Divine Region and their future," said Kai and Yinger while staring straight into Kai Waiao's eyes. "This is the most unacceptable outcome for the Northern Region Devil Queen, am I right?" Kai Waiao shot her a smile but didn't say anything. When they walked out of the central hall, Kang Shishin immediately walked up to them. He seemed to have been waiting for some time. "The deep sea barrier has been activated," said Kang Shishin. For the first time, he didn't bow or address the Devil Queen as Your Majesty. "Thank you," Kai Waiao said indifferently. "I heard that the power of the deep sea lies in its myriad forms. I also heard that it is especially suited for defense. Considering that this is the final barrier of your 10 Directions deep sea realm, it must be able to astound even the likes of the Western Divine Region. There are many things I dare not claim to be true, but the efficacy of this deep sea barrier is not among them. You won't be disappointed, Devil Queen." Kang Shishin smiled a little before asking suddenly, "If you don't mind, I have a question for you." "Oh," Kai Waiao glanced at him. "Considering the current situation, the chances that your forces will survive is almost zero. However, you are about to entrust the first and most important defense line to my deep-sea barrier. To me, it was impossible to decipher Kang Shishin's expression. Aren't you afraid that I'll stab you in the back? If I open up a way when the Western Divine region shows up, the deep-sea realm may still suffer severe repercussions, but the merit should be enough to lessen the punishment somewhat. At the very least, we wouldn't be wiped out to the last. On the other hand, if I were to stick with you and fight the Western Divine region until the end, they would definitely destroy me and my entire realm. You should know that I, Kang Shishin, am a smart man, and this choice is about as simple as it gets. Shishin's attitude had clearly changed as well. Previously, he had to bend his knees to the devil race in order to protect himself, and to prevent the 10 Directions deep sea realm from turning into the next southern sea realm. Now, though, he held the initiative, because he was the one who controlled the deep sea barrier. If he chose to backstab the devil race and open the barrier after the Western Divine region arrived, their already hopeless situation would become even more hopeless than it already was. Not only that, the merit he would earn from doing it might even be enough to cancel his crime for having submitted to the devil race. It was the wisest and simplest choice, so simple that even a 3-year-old couldn't make the wrong decision. The deep-sea gods and divine envoys at least were clearly anticipating it. They were all waiting for Kang Shishin to give that order. However, not only did the Devil Queen not raise her guard in his presence, she didn't demand that he submit to something like the Brahma Soul death-wishing mark. Forget taking control of the deep-sea divine realm by force. She hadn't even warned him verbally or shot him a warning stare. Her lack of reaction greatly piqued Kang Shishin's interest and curiosity. After all, the Devil Queen he knew was anything but a good person. Kai Waiao replied in an indifferent tone. I heard that you, God Emperor Shishin, were the first person to swear his loyalty to the Devil Master after the Southern Sea Realm was destroyed. In fact, you even attacked the Southern Sea God Emperor prematurely and got ahead of both the Xianxia God Emperor and the Purple Micro God Emperor. The Xianxia God Emperor and Purple Micro God Emperor are of the follower type, so their choice to submit to the Devil Master at the time was hardly unexpected. Your choice and your decisiveness, however, deeply interests me. It is why I have spent some time researching you recently. Is that so? What kind of person do you think I am then, Devil Queen? Kang Shishin asked with a grin. You are a man who refuses to obey the norm, answered Kai Waiao directly. When you begged the Devil Master to take you in, you gave him a most curious answer. You complained that the world was too boring. Kang Shishin. That was not the only answer you gave, but it is the only one that I chose to believe, even if it was the least believable reason of them all for someone of your status. Why do I say so? Because it fits the terrible infamy you've made for yourself in the God realm. For the past month, you have done everything in your power to seize the Southern Sea Realm, Xianxia Realm, and Purple Micro Realm's resources. You have spared no effort to collect intel on the Western Divine region and the remnants of the Southern Sea. You used everything trick up your sleeve to perform your duties most wonderfully. Most people would think that you're just trying your best to express your loyalty. But in reality, you did it because you enjoyed it, didn't you? Everything you've been ordered to do so far was something you have always wanted to do, but were never able to, until now. Kang Shishin's eyes started twitching uncontrollably. Her eyes were covered by black mist, so he could only catch glimpses of her gaze from time to time. That alone still sent a chill through his heart. They couldn't have had more than 10 exchanges since their first meeting, and yet he felt like she had seen through his entire person completely. Kai Waiao had already walked past him by the time he awoke from his daze. You have been a God Emperor for a long time, so long that few things in the world can stimulate you anymore. To you, the inability to vent your frustrations was no different from torture. That's why you were very excited when the Northern Divine region invaded and darkness blotted out the heavens. Well, a new opportunity has appeared before you. It is up to you to take the risky gamble, thrill seeker. Am I gambling or are you gambling? Kang Shishin asked. We both are, said Kai Waiao with a smile. But if you need a little push, I can give you that. You are a man who jumps into the darkness like an excited child and dreams of witnessing the change of the world in your lifetime. You won't make the safe choice and become a boring emperor like Xianxia and Purple Micro, right? That would be a shame. Kang Shishin narrowed his eyes but said nothing. Kaina Yinger had been staring intently at Kai Waiao's back throughout the conversation. She thought to herself, if this witch ever becomes an enemy, she will die first no matter the cost. Oh, right. Kai Waiao suddenly stopped in her tracks and looked at Shishin again. Can you adjust the deep sea barrier to just 30% of its full power? Kang Shishin replied, of course. The deep sea divine power is capable of countless changes, much less basic energy control. Very good. When you activate the deep sea barrier later, please make sure it's at 30% power, Kai Waiao said. But why? Kang Shishin frowned. It will take a not insignificant amount of time to reactivate it at full power. It is practically suicide against the Western Divine Region's forces. You only need to do what you're told. The Devil Queen's voice was faint, but the authority behind it was unquestionable. Very well, I will do as you command, Devil Queen. Kang Shishin stopped asking questions and accepted the order. The news that the full might of the 6 king realms of the Western Divine Region was about to bear down on the 10 Directions Deep Sea Realm sent countless deep sea profound practitioners fleeing like headless chickens. Countless people and profound arcs were scattering in every direction. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A while later, a blue-colored barrier appeared in the sky before expanding slowly to envelop the entire deep sea god realm. The crystalline blue energy of the barrier made it look like a bubble that might burst at the slightest contact. It was hard to believe that it would be the ultimate barrier of a southern region king realm. Time passed quickly and mercilessly. 2 hours passed in the blink of an eye. In the central hall, Kai Waiao finally turned around and faced the entrance. The last 30 minutes before the inevitable was supposed to be the busiest time, and yet she had spent it staring at the eternal heaven pearl until the very last moment. In the end, Yun-Chi hadn't appeared ahead of time, not that she thought that a miracle would happen from the beginning. Back facing toward the eternal heaven pearl, Kai Waiao started walking toward the entrance. Her eyes blackened with every step she took until they looked like a pale soul devouring abysses. Yun-Chi, Mu Xuanian and I have watched you grow, taught you, felt our hearts flutter for you, and witnessed all of your good or bad moments. For you, she was willing to give up the snow song realm she had protected her whole life. For you, I am willing to end the future of the northern divine region as well. If you are able to escape, even when no one else can, then, given enough reason, even the most logical woman would want to act illogically once in a while. I'm sorry, I don't have even the slightest confidence that I'll be able to do it. 2 days is just too long, if only you could hear our voices, if only you could appear even a day sooner. The sky of 10 Directions Deep Sea Realm was dark when she exited the central hall. Every divine master was gathered in front of the entrance. Everyone was present. Not a single person had withdrawn from the battle. No energy swirled in the air despite the terrifying lineup, however. There was only suffocating silence. The Northern Region Profound Practitioners looked at Kai Waiao. The Deep Sea Profound Practitioners looked at Kang Shishin. Let's go. 2 simple words opened the curtains for a great battle that would stun countless star realms to come. Let's go, said Yan Xianxia with a light wave of his hand. He sounded neither excited nor tragic. There was only calm. They moved to the west of the deep sea god realm and stared at the empty space where the enemy was expected to appear. If anyone had any lingering fear before, they were gone now. After all, they were the ones who chose to insert half their bodies into the grave. When even death could no longer strike fear into a person, all that was left was the will to fight until the last drop of blood. They didn't have to wait too long. An unnatural spatial distortion suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and the next moment an impossibly huge floating city flashed into existence. Boom, the world Dragon City slammed into the deep sea barrier like a meteor. The crystalline blue barrier shivered intensely. Thousands of kilometers of Earth outside deep sea god realm was flattened like soft clay. If they hadn't evacuated the people earlier, this impact alone would have taken countless lives. The floating city stopped above the barrier after the impact. At the same time, many terrifying pressures passed through the deep sea barrier and enveloped the entire deep sea god realm in a vice-like grip. Hearts began racing many times faster than before. In the god realm, divine masters were the pinnacle of all existences. Those who became a divine master gained the right to disdain anything that wasn't a king realm. Even the king of an upper star realm could decide the fate of a middle star realm with the snap of a finger. Divine Master Realm was the realm countless profound practitioners dreamed of attaining, but physically couldn't do it even if they cultivated their whole lives. So, how much pressure was 6 king realms worth of divine masters exuding? The strongest king realms in the world, no less. Suffice to say, it was something no mortal could ever imagine. The 10 Directions Deep Sea Realm was a king realm themselves, but even they seemed to be shivering before the pressure. "God Emperor, have you?" a sea god implored in the softest voice possible, only to be shut down rudely by his master. "Shut up," growled Kang Shishin. When he lifted his head and stared at the floating city, the struggle in his eyes suddenly vanished like it was never there. Taking its place was a blazing madness that erupted like a volcano. Ah, what a terrifying pressure this is. It feels like my soul is being torn to pieces. The despair is physical. The only outcome I can see from this is the destruction of the deep sea realm and the death of everyone who chose to resist. But if I can turn this around, if I make the impossible bet and actually win. This is madness, all right. So much madness that I can't wait to bet on it with my life. His eyeballs were shivering, his scalp was completely numb, and every pore on his body was shivering with fright and excitement. He knew then that he would make a mad choice no one sane would ever make. He nearly ejaculated from the decision alone. This is life. This is the choice. No, the entertainment a true god emperor would enjoy. Long Bai slowly stepped out of the floating city. He looked at the king realm below. In the god realm, there were 16 god emperors, but only one monarch. Right now, that monarch was standing right above their heads and looking down on them like a god. Everything and everyone was but ants before him. It's time to practice the worst area of my writing skill. Fight scenes again, my poor hair. Oh. Withered dragons stood behind Long Bai. Every single one of these 5 terrifying existences that had appeared out of nowhere exuded a draconic aura that seemed as ancient and vast as the divine spirits of old. The appearance of these 5 people also made everyone feel as if a gigantic ancient god had pierced the walls of space and time with 5 of its fingers, engulfing the entire world in a peerlessly dreadful oppressive might. Behind the venerable withered dragons stood the 8 dragon gods, their faces grim and dark, and behind them stood all 43 dragon sovereigns and 308 master dragons. Very soon, the 5 great god emperors of the Kilin realm, Emperor Kai realm, Blue Dragon realm, Hui Dragon realm, and Myriad Manifestations realms slowly stepped out, and following behind them were the auras of several hundred divine masters. The 10 Directions deep sea realm shook violently, and it even seemed as if the entire southern divine region was shaking violently along with it. And it continued unabated. If they had not known the enemy's array of forces in advance, just the 5 venerable withered dragons would have been enough to scare all the northern region profound practitioners witless. They had already tasted the despair, and yet they had sworn to give up their lives even in the midst of it. Under this heavy pressure, heavier than anything they had ever felt, none of them felt even the slightest bit of fear. They merely clenched their teeth and defiantly balled their hands into fists. "Strange." One of the pure dragon gods' eyebrows arched slightly. "They seem to be prepared for our arrival." The barrier was opened, the deep-sea profound practitioners had clearly been dispersed, and the devils of the north were already in strict formation. This wasn't something that could be accomplished within a few minutes. The forces of the western divine region had still been in the dragon god realm 2 hours ago, and the existence of the world dragon city was something that had only been known to the successive generations of dragon monarchs and dragon gods. As such, there was no reason that these northern devils would be able to predict that they would descend on this place in a mere 2 hours. The same suspicions were evident on the faces of all the profound practitioners of the western divine region. To think that the forces of the devil race were actually this strong, Longye said with an emphatic sigh. These devils were entirely different from the devil race of the north that he had been familiar with. "No wonder," Long replied. He now knew why Long Bai had not hesitated to rouse them from their slumber. It might be easy to defeat the forces of the northern divine region that were assembled before them, but it would require the power of the 5 venerable withered dragons if they wanted to exterminate every last one of them. The situation seems to be quite different from what we had imagined. I can't seem to sense Yun Chi's aura, the Blue Dragon Emperor suddenly said in a low voice. "There's no need for us to say any unnecessary things. Let's leave everything to the Dragon Monarch," the Kilin Emperor reminded her. However, a strange light flashed through his old eyes as he surveyed the scene before him. He actually could not detect any despair or fear from these devils, whether he used his eyes or his spiritual senses. Instead, he sensed shocking malice and fiercely burning determination. The Blue Dragon Emperor did not speak up again. At the back of the northern divine region's formation, Kai Weiao stared at the forces of the western divine region, but she did not step forward. "What's on your mind?" Kai and Yinger asked. We will let Kang Shishin handle the first interaction with them. I've already taught him what to say and do, Kai Waiao replied. Kainai Yinger's brow furrowed greatly as she exclaimed, "What? Don't worry, he'll definitely do an excellent job," Kai Waiao said as she gave a dry chuckle. "I can sense that he's really enjoying the current times, and the following events are going to give him even more enjoyment. After all, this is a direct confrontation with the Dragon Monarch himself. There's nothing else that can satisfy a true madman more than this current scenario. Drag things out." Her smile instantly vanished as she uttered those three simple words. "What we need more than anything right now is to do everything we can, no matter how underhanded, to buy time and drag things out." However, it was at this time that Kang Shishin's laughter boomed across the skies of the 10 Directions deep sea realm. Ha 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 ha! Kang Shishin boldly stepped forward, as his God-Emperor voice cut through the oppressive might that seemed to fill the sky and shook the hearts and souls of all who heard it. He cupped his hands, and there was a faint smile on his face as he said, 10 Directions deep sea realm, King Kang Shishin has been waiting for the Dragon Monarch's glorious arrival for quite some time now. However, I did not think that my Lord Dragon Monarch would be so impatient to get here that you would actually use the world Dragon City, something which has lain hidden for many years, to travel all the way here. This Shishin feels both incredibly honored and incredibly afraid. Oh, that's right. I can't forget to greet my 5 seniors here. Greetings to the honored, venerable, withered dragons. To think that all of you actually chose to come here instead of continuing to wither away in the Dragon God realm. This special and unprecedented honor is something my tiny deep sea realm finds incredibly hard to bear. Ha 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 ha! Everyone from the Dragon God realm grimaced as he said those words. Even Long Bai's impassive face twitched for an instant. The world Dragon City, the venerable withered dragons. These were things that even the 5 God Emperors of the Western Divine Region were not aware of. All of them had been utterly convinced that the enemy forces would be in complete chaos and disarray when they descended upon the 10 Directions deep sea realm. They had expected them to fall apart like a sandcastle, being hit by a massive tidal wave before the battle had even begun. However, reality could not have been any more different. The enemy had not only assembled in tight formation, they had even yelled out the names of the world Dragon City and the venerable withered dragons. It was almost as if they had all of the Dragon God realm's secrets in the palms of their hands. What was even stranger was that they actually had not chosen to retreat even though they already knew what was going to happen in advance. Instead, they had chosen to meet them head-on with all of their might. As he stared at the gathered dragon gods and Long Bai's eyes, which were trembling with shock, Kang Shishin's mouth crooked up yet again. He could not think of any better guests for him to entertain. Long Bai stared into the distance as he blatantly ignored Kang Shishin and called out in a calm voice, "Yun Chi, show yourself." However, Kang Shishin was the one who replied to him. He let out a low chuckle as he waved a hand, instantly causing water-like ripples to appear on the surface of the deep sea barrier. "My Lord Dragon Monarch, if you want to see our Devil Master, shouldn't you be asking this 10 Directions deep sea realm for permission first?" "What a sad joke," the Azure Dragon God said. Profound contempt and pity appeared in his grayish-blue eyes as he said, "To think that you've actually grown loyal to the devils who have made a lapdog out of you. For the 10 Directions deep sea realm to have a God Emperor like you is truly a shame, a stain on all of your ancestors." Compared to Kang Shishin's fearless demeanor, all of the sea gods and divine envoys were showing expressions filled with discomfort and unease. They had originally thought that Kang Shishin would grandly open the barrier to admit the Dragon Monarch and use this most opportune time to atone for his sins. However, the reality of the situation was the complete opposite of their expectations. Every single word that Kang Shishin said caused their hearts to leap wildly in their chests, and if the person speaking weren't their 10 Direction deep sea realm's God Emperor, they would be the first to leap out and pummel him to the ground to stop him from speaking. Long Bai's eyes finally went dark. He looked at Kang Shishin with calm eyes before he said, "Kang Shishin, you have one last chance, and that is on account of the relationship that I had with your grandfather." The gathered sea gods and divine envoys all turned to look at Kang Shishin. However, they saw Kang Shishin's lips crook up as he replied in a languid and indolent voice, "I do not need that chance of yours." Those words left no leeway or room for misinterpretation. "My lord," a few sea gods cried out in unified shock and alarm. "My Lord Dragon Monarch," the overflowing waters sea god stepped out and said in an anxious voice. My lord definitely didn't mean what he just said. He's just been bewitched by these devils. Boom. A blue figure flashed through the air as space was instantly severed. Kang Shishin's hand was wrapped in blue light as he delivered a heavy chop to the overflowing water's sea god's throat. A huge and dreadful explosion rang in the air as the overflowing water's sea god's voice was suddenly cut off. Kang Shishin's terrifying blow had broken his neck. His attack was as swift as flowing light, and it was ruthless in the extreme. There was no way that Kang Shishin could have pulled off this attack on the fly, and it was now clear that he had already prepared it in advance. The overflowing water's sea god had been severely injured by that surprise attack, and the other sea gods and divine envoys were also greatly shocked by it. It had happened before they could even think of stopping Kang Shishin. My lord! Several sea gods were just about to step forward, but a sudden blue glow erupted from Kang Shishin's body and caused them to shrink backward as their pupils contracted in shock. That was the 10 Directions Deep Sea Realm's divine artifact, the Deep Sea Divine Pearl. It flowed with blue light as it rested in the palm of Kang Shishin's hand, and it seemed as if a boundless ocean was hidden within it. The same blue light was also radiating from the overflowing water's sea god, who was currently writhing on the ground in agony. As the divine artifact of the 10 Directions Deep Sea Realm, the Deep Sea Divine Pearl had two functions. It served as both a medium to contain the divine legacies of the Deep Sea Realm, and also possessed a dreadful ability that was very similar to the one possessed by the Dragon Monarch God Realm's Brahma Soul Bell, the ability to forcibly restrict or even withdraw the deep sea divine power that rested in a sea god's body. This was also the main reason why Kang Shishin, who had already had a notorious reputation in the God Realm, faced no resistance or defiance from the denizens of the Deep Sea Realm at all, even when he had been the first to submit to the devil race. As he sensed the deep sea divine power swiftly draining out of his body, the overflowing water's sea god barely managed to croak out a few words in spite of his broken neck. My lord spare, boom. Kang Shishin stomped down, his foot burying the overflowing water's sea god's head into the profound stones which paved the roads of the deep sea divine region. Only the grotesque sight of his body twitching and spasming remained. Bright red blood swiftly pooled at his feet, but Kang Shishin didn't move. His foot continued to press down on the overflowing water's sea god's head as his lips curved into a smile which sent shudders through the heart of every sea god. To think that this servant of mine would actually be such a traitorous thing, what a pity. He turned around and looked at the ashen-faced sea gods as he said, If such a thing happens again, I want you to simply kill the transgressor. I don't expect to have to tell you to do it either. Do you understand? Yes. All the sea gods barely managed to grunt out that word, and it was as if all their necks had been broken as well. My deepest apologies, Kang Shishin said with a hearty laugh as he looked up at the Dragon Monarch once more. I had to deal with a traitorous fool, and I'm sorry that my Lord Dragon Monarch and my honored guests had to witness such an ugly sight. God Emperor Shishin, Zhou Yuzi's voice rang out. Your actions are not only harming the sea gods under you, they are also burying the deep sea bloodline that has continued for hundreds of thousands of years. What are you thinking? Heh! Kang Shishin gave a low chuckle. Eternal Heaven God Emperor, I may be a loyal dog, but you are a defeated one. Since we belong to the same kind, we should be sympathizing with one another. Why do you feel compelled to come out and bark at me like a mad dog? Zhou Yuzi gave a deep sigh. It looks like you are beyond all hope. As such, I can only bury you together with these dark wretches. Do you really think that you're up to it? Kang Shishin sneered. Long Bai raised his head and no longer bothered to look at Kang Shishin. His voice shook the world as it boomed out like an oracle from the heavens themselves. Yun Qi, get out here! Now that this time had finally come, the Dragon Monarch had not called for the attack to begin or the barrier to be destroyed. Instead, he sought out Yun Qi directly. It looks like my Lord Dragon Monarch truly is getting on in age, because it seems as if your ears aren't working too well anymore. Kang Shishin's bold words shocked and scandalized the sea gods as he continued. If you want to see the Devil Master, you'll have to get past this deep sea barrier first. Come, he lifted a hand to point at the gathered dragon gods. Why don't you let this king see just how long it will take for you so-called dragon gods to break this deep sea barrier? I eagerly await it. Heh! The Crimson Destruction Dragon God gave a cold snort of contempt. Is a lousy barrier like this even worthy of our personal attention? My lord, he asked as he looked towards the Dragon Monarch. The Dragon Monarch gave a very small nod of his head. "Boom." The Crimson Destruction Dragon God immediately gave the order, and the 43 dragon sovereigns standing behind him attacked at the same time. The roiling draconic energy that was released in that instant immediately caused a dreadful spatial storm to form. Bzzzzzzzzz. In the Dragon God realm, only those who had reached the 8th level of the Divine Master realm could qualify as Dragon Sovereigns. Among these 43 Dragon Sovereigns, 19 were level 9 Divine Masters and 24 were level 8 Divine Masters. So when their attacks smashed against the barrier at the same time, it felt as if a billion heavenly bells were ringing in the southern divine region. The deep sea barrier violently shuddered as dozens of distorted ripples appeared on its surface. After the Dragon Sovereigns finished their attacks, it was the Master Dragon's turn. 308 attacks at the level of the Divine Master realm streaked toward the barrier and struck it with a soul-shattering impact. However, Kang Shishin still did not move, and Xianxia quietly raised a hand to stop anyone from advancing. He also did not understand why the Devil Queen had told them specifically that they were not to solidify and support the barrier when it was being fiercely assaulted by the enemy. Realm had been second only to the Southern Sea God realm in total power. However, when it came to protective barriers, the Deep Sea Barrier was the strongest in the Southern Divine region. The Deep Sea Divine power was not a water-based profound energy. Instead, it was something that the ancient Deep Sea God clan had divined by observing the movements of the tides. It was as fluid and eternally changing as water, and the Deep Sea Barrier, which was constructed with the strongest Deep Sea Divine power, was exactly the same. The most incredible thing about this barrier was that it would instantly use its Deep Sea Divine power to redistribute any damage it suffered across the rest of the barrier, so trying to punch a hole in it was practically an impossible task. Rumble, rumble, rumble. It seemed as if a billion bolts of heavenly lightning were falling down from the heavens every instant as the ground around the Deep Sea Divine region fractured and crumbled. Blue light continuously erupted from the Deep Sea Barrier as it kept on bending inwards and changing shape to endure the attacks raining down on it. The strength of a King Realm's ultimate barrier could not be doubted, even though the Deep Sea Barrier was currently only at 30% of its normal strength. Even the Southern Sea God realm at full strength would need at least a day or two to shatter it. However, hundreds of Divine Masters were attacking it at the same time, so even the strongest barrier wouldn't be able to last for very long. No barrier in the history of the God realm had ever received such special treatment before. Ha 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 ha! Even the earth-shaking explosions and the sound of space violently shaking could not drown out Kang Shishin's wild laughter. The Dragon Sovereigns and Master Dragons of the Dragon God realm are famed throughout the universe, but they only have this much ability. All of you are attacking this Deep Sea Barrier together, but you can't even make a crack in it. My Lord Dragon Gods, I think you should obediently attack as well. You've assembled such a grand army, so if you still can't take down this Deep Sea Barrier in half a day, I don't know where your Dragon God realm will hide its face. Kang Shishin's attitude had turned from hesitance and respect to bold statements, to provocative insults that threw all decorum to the wind. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside of him, unleashing the complete lunatic that had been caged inside. The gathered sea gods had already grown numb to this shock. In actual fact, as the ones who were the most familiar with Kang Shishin in the 10 Directions Deep Sea realm, they were intimately aware of one thing. Kang Shishin was actually the most normal when he was behaving abnormally. The regal bearing he displayed on a daily basis was, in actual fact, a suppression of his base nature. Kang Shishin was absolutely not willfully acting mad. His provocation toward the dragon gods concealed a profound scheme. His current behavior left the dragon gods in a state where not even they could make a move, let alone Long Bai and the venerable withered dragons. Wow, he really is a special kind of mad dog, huh? The Purple River Dragon God said as she disdainfully pursed her lips. Kang Shishin did not grow angry when he heard that nasty insult. His eyes gleamed with joy as a wild grin formed on his face. A mad dog? What a great title. That's a crazy name that was practically made for me. He spun on his heels and gave a weird howl before he spoke. Listen up. From now on, I am the Devil Master's mad dog. When the Devil Master covers the world in darkness in the future, I will bite to death anyone who dares to defy him. His God-Emperor voice was even louder than the huge explosions that were violently striking the Deep Sea Barrier, as he proudly proclaimed his will to the devils of the north, the profound practitioners of the west, and the entire deep-sea realm. The mad glee on his face and the fanaticism that burned in his eyes made it seem like he had been bestowed with some sort of exalted honor. This time, even Yan Xianxia and Fen Deaki were looking at Kang Shishin as if he was some kind of freak. This was someone who was actually a god emperor of the southern divine region. Of course, he glanced to the side before he suddenly slowly licked his lips like a vicious dog that was straining at the leash. Today, the mad dog of the Devil Master will use the sharp teeth of this deep-sea realm to bite off the heads of a few stupid dragons. Heh, it's too bad because a mad dog like you will soon become a dead dog. How disgraceful. The Kai Dragon Emperor's eyes shone with contempt as he felt a deep shame for being a fellow god emperor with Kang Shishin right now. He waved a hand and barked out a command. Attack! The Kai Dragon Divine Masters of the Emperor Kai realm surged forward upon hearing that command, their attacks bombarding the deep-sea barrier. The Hui Dragon Emperor and Myriad Manifestations God Emperor also barked out similar commands. As the Hui Dragon Divine Masters and the Divine Masters of the Myriad Manifestations realm joined in the fray. Advance! The Killin Emperor raised a hand while he used his eyes to send a signal to the Blue Dragon Emperor. He was well aware that the Blue Dragon Emperor did not even want to be here in the first place. She had never enjoyed conflict or battle, and she was even less willing to make a move against Yun Qi. The Blue Dragon Emperor helplessly waved her hand. Blue light erupted, and dragon roars filled the air as the forces of the Blue Dragon realm also joined the attack. When all 5 king realms of the west attacked simultaneously, nearly 30% of the deep-sea realm's land was instantly sunk, and dozens of outrageous dents were made in the deep-sea barrier. It took a very long time for it to regain its previous form, and the deep-sea blue light that it was radiating had turned muddled and chaotic. Kai Waiao softly sighed in the back of the formation. Kang Shishin has gone completely crazy. He even looks like he'd be completely okay with getting killed at the end of this fight. Rumble, rumble. Kai and Yinger raised her head to look at the sky before she said, I'm afraid that this barrier won't last for much longer. What are you going to do next? Kai Waiao suddenly turned to stare fixedly at Kai and Yinger. Kai and Yinger. Kaining, the method I used to cause the people of the northern divine region to give up their lives for Yun Qi, is the same method that made Kang Shishin be willing to become a mad dog. What do you think this method is? Kai Waiao asked. Speak plainly, Kai and Yinger replied. She didn't have any time to waste on such frivolous things during this desperate situation. I merely guided and amplified the desires that already existed in their hearts, Kai Waiao replied. If so, what do you think Long Bai's greatest desire is at the moment? Kai and Yinger didn't even need to pause to think as she replied. It's naturally Yun Qi. That's right. But it's more accurate to say that it's a desire to slowly trample over Yun Qi, Kai Waiao said in an unhurried manner. Despite having an absolute advantage in power, Long Bai has not hesitated to use the world Dragon City and the venerable withered dragons to boost his already overwhelming power. His real goal is to completely defeat Yun Qi in the most humiliating and domineering fashion, so that he will face the ultimate despair. He wants to see Yun Qi in a completely helpless and powerless state, and it would be best if he were to end up groveling and begging at the very end. This is the only way to vent the extreme hatred and jealousy he has toward Yun Qi. As such, we can use this point to create an opportunity for ourselves. Kai and Yinger sank into deep thought as she pondered Kai Waiao's words. The moment the barrier is broken, I will go and face Long Bai myself. Since I won't be around, it'll be up to you to learn and understand as much as you can about him. Kai and Yinger turned to look at Kai Waiao, a puzzled look in her eyes. Now this is surprising. You're normally full of secrets, but you're trying to play teacher at this critical juncture. Isn't it a tad bit too late? Kai Waiao's laughter sounded like the tinkling of silver bells. Teach you. So this means that you've been hoping that I'd teach you something all this while. That's right. Kai and Yinger actually admitted it without a single shred of hesitation. It may sound laughable to you, but when I was still the Brahma Monarch goddess, I had once believed that my schemes were perfect and unparalleled. No matter whether I wanted to trap someone or obtain something, nothing could escape my grasp. It was only after Kai and Fanshin crippled my Brahma soul that I realized that I was merely a laughable and foolish child in front of a true fox. I had danced in the palm of his hand for my entire life, like a puppet on a string, yet I had been so arrogant and conceited. Heh. The schemes and plans I had once been proud of were nothing without the backing of the Brahma Monarch God realm. However, you were the dark enchantress that even Kyanai Fanshin was afraid of. In terms of cunning and intelligence, I am far from your equal. Honestly speaking, you even gave me an odd sense of security every time you were around, no matter what circumstances we were facing, and I believe Yun Qi feels the same way as well. Kyanai Yinger, who had always shown animosity toward Kai Weiao on the surface, was showing a rare moment of honesty in these dire circumstances. The smile on Kai Weiao's face deepened by several degrees. She gave a soft sigh and said, "To actually hear such words from someone with such a great amount of pride and self-esteem as yourself, I guess this is some kind of honor in its own special way. However, there is no need for you to downplay your abilities. You were merely too young and your life had simply been too successful until 5 years ago. If you had my years and experience, I trust that you would have surpassed me in every way." "So," Kyanai Yinger replied, "why are you suddenly trying to teach me how to become a better schemer?" As she looked away from Kyanai Yinger, Kai Weiao turned around to stare at the blue barrier that looked like it was about to collapse at any second. After that, she said in a calm but sad voice, "I hope that you can survive this, Kyanai Yinger. If we can truly attain a miracle in the end and we can hold out until Yun Qi exits the eternal heaven pearl, you must do everything you can to flee together with him. Do not look back. And if this ends in the worst possible outcome, like Yun Qi and the eternal heaven pearl falling into Long Bai's hand, it is even more imperative for you to escape. Due to Long Bai's extreme hatred of Yun Qi, it is very likely that he won't kill him immediately. Therefore, you will become the last thread of hope, because I know that you will definitely do anything you can to save him as long as you're alive. In fact, I would actually hope that you'd flee right here and now, but I know that you won't agree to that." Kyanai Yinger's brow furrowed heavily as she spoke in a low voice. "You're so desperate for me to escape, but how about you?" Kai Weiao's chest rose and fell violently as her voice turned melancholy and gentle. "I was born in the northern divine region as a devil who grew up within the darkness. I was also blessed by the darkness, inheriting the devil soul of a primordial devil emperor. Helping the profound practitioners of the northern divine region overthrow their fate is my one wish. It is also the duty I inherited along with the nirvana devil soul. Yet I did not persuade them to retreat today. Instead, I persuaded my kinsmen from the north, the heart of the northern region, to sell their lives. If all of them die, the hope of the northern divine region will die with them." Kai Weiao closed her eyes. "Just this sin alone has made me unworthy of living, so the only thing I can do is to accompany them in death." Kyanai Yinger took a sudden step forward. Her golden eyes trembled violently. She simply couldn't find any words. "Don't worry, I will definitely help you escape before I die." After that, she paused briefly before she whispered again, "I definitely will." Kyanai Yinger was just about to say something, but a loud sound suddenly reverberated in the air above them. Crack. This time, the sound that rang out from the barrier was different from all the previous world-shaking explosions. It was the unmistakable sound of something being broken, a most dreadful sound. A white crack had appeared on the surface of the deep-sea barrier, and it was swiftly starting to spread. It looked as if the sky itself had started to tear open. This crack foretold the impending collapse of the deep-sea barrier. This was the strongest barrier in the southern divine region. But at 30% of its power, it could only resist the dreadful attacks of hundreds of divine masters for a mere 45 minutes. At this time, both the myriad manifestations God Emperor and Hui Dragon Emperor exchanged looks before they suddenly attacked at the same time. The power of both God Emperors hurtled towards the tottering deep-sea barrier with deadly force and intent. "Shatter!" both God Emperors roared. Kai Weiao's figure zoomed forward as she shouted, "Yan 1, Yan 3, Reap." Two black figures ripped open a hole in space as they shot into it and appeared near the surface of the barrier. Two huge clusters of Yama Devil power flew out from the barrier to violently explode against the attacks that the myriad manifestations God Emperor and the Hui Dragon God Emperor had unleashed. Rumble. As black mist slowly spread and malice soared into the sky, the already tormented deep-sea barrier bent like a crumpled tissue. The two God Emperors who had attacked let out low and muffled groans as the backlash sent them flying. When they finally came to a stop, they could feel their numb arms begin to throb with intense pain. Everyone turned to look at the two dreadful black figures within the barrier in shock. Those are two of the three hidden Yama ancestors who once hid in the Yama Devil Realm's bone sea of eternal darkness, Long Bai calmly explained. The three of them have reached the peak of darkness profound energy. "Ah, so that is who they are," Long San said in a low voice. The one on the right isn't the least bit inferior to us, Long Wu said. He is still nothing more than a devilish wretch. Let us end him, Long Si replied. At this time, a voice that was so charming that it penetrated one's heart and soul rang out in the distance. The dragon god realm certainly lives up to its exalted name. You even know the greatest secret of our northern divine region. Kai Waya was already flying forward as she spoke. She stopped in front of Yan 1 and Yan 2 and looked straight at Long Bai. Devil Queen! The crimson destruction dragon god's pupils dilated as the joints of his knuckles popped noisily. However, what he couldn't accept was that he actually felt something other than hatred when facing Kai Waya. He actually also felt a thread of icy fear course through his body, a fear he couldn't dispel no matter how hard he tried. It was as if that dreadful devil soul had never truly left his dragon soul. As he faced the famed Devil Queen of the North, Long Bai merely gave a casual glance. His face remained impassive as he said, "Is your so-called Devil Master Yun Qi determined to be a gutless coward?" Heh! Those words elicited a chuckle from Kai Waya. Her seductive and cottony voice contained a trace of penetrating mockery when she spoke again. You are well aware that our Devil Master is not around, and that is why you chose to attack with such a grand force. Yet you're calling our Devil Master a gutless coward. As the monarch of the entire primal chaos, I am surprised that you are such a hypocritical, lowly, and fake person. It truly is disappointing. His draconic eyes turned to face her as his words thundered with the weight of 100 mountains. What did you say? Kai Waya proudly replied. The forces of our northern divine region have been gathered here for many moons. During that time, it would have been the perfect time for us to destroy the dragon god realm while you were still abroad. However, the Devil Master said that such a victory was devoid of honor, and it would only be a stain on our northern divine region's dignity. Hence, our battle with the dragon god realm would only take place after you had returned home. The Devil Master mentioned more than a few times that he desired to take you on in a one-on-one battle. As such, even though the Devil Master hates you with all of his might, we didn't take the opportunity to attack the dragon god realm even once during the months that you were away from home. That was despite our devil race sweeping through the eastern divine region and trampling on the southern divine region. Long Bai? The eyes of both Yan Xianxia and Fen Deaki slowly turned as wide as saucers. However, you, the Grand Dragon Monarch, Kai Waya's words were filled with venomous mockery. After you discovered that our Devil Master was not in the deep sea realm, you seized this opportunity to attack. In fact, you even used the World Dragon City, a divine artifact that has been hidden for 1,000,000 years, to descend upon us like a bolt of lightning. Ayah, I truly never expected that you, the Dragon Monarch, were actually so terrified of the Devil Master. This is truly a surprise, and a great disappointment as well. However, since this is the case, there truly isn't a need for the Devil Master to face you head-on, because your cowardly conduct and hypocritical actions have already disqualified you. 8. Kai Waya's words didn't shake the dragon gods in the slightest. In truth, they found her scheme childish and laughable. A puff of air escaped from the white rainbow dragon god's nostrils. He was just about to launch into a mocking tirade when he felt his entire body go cold and his breath catch in his throat. All 8 of the dragon gods immediately turned to look at the dragon monarch. His face had turned dark and grim, and his entire body was radiating an extremely shocking rage that he was trying his best to suppress. Furthermore, it wasn't just a flash of rage. It was a rage that had been burning for some time now. He was the dragon monarch, the only monarch in the god realm, the most exalted and unparalleled existence in the entire primal chaos. He was the strongest in terms of profound strength and raw power. He had the most exalted and revered status, had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, and had the wisdom and temperament to match them. Even if all the mountains of the universe collapsed, even if the entire world was burning around him, his emotions would remain calm and unfrazzled. Even if he faced self-confident fools or mockers, it wouldn't cause a single ripple in his heart. All of this was nothing more than a childish joke born of ignorance. So to say that the Dragon Monarch was not qualified to fight someone, to anyone else, to almost everyone that was present, there wasn't a more forced, stupid, and pathetic insult in the world than this. It was an insult so woeful that it didn't even have the qualifications to cause even a single hair on the Dragon Monarch's brow to twitch. However, crack, crack, A sound so crystalline clear that it sent shudders through one's soul rang in the air, and shockingly enough, that was the sound of the Dragon Monarch's knuckles popping. The eyes of all the dragon gods, dragon sovereigns, master dragons, and god emperors kept looking toward the Dragon Monarch's hands and face over and over again, and looks of shock and disbelief slowly crept up their faces. Even the 5 great venerable withered dragons had started to frown. As the supreme Dragon Monarch, how could he be so easily enraged by such a pathetic insult? The white rainbow dragon god stared at the Dragon Monarch dumbfoundedly for a few breaths before he finally came back to himself. The lazy insult that he had been about to hurl had now been transformed into a furious rebuke. What a joke! Why would our dragon god realm be scared of a mere devil master? Oh, Kai Waiao shot him a sidelong glance. Just as expected, it wasn't only the Dragon Monarch. Even his dragon gods are a bunch of fake hypocrites who have the gall to do the deed but not admit to it. As they say, birds of a feather flock together. You didn't even hesitate to use the world Dragon City to rush over here, just so that you could catch us when the Devil Master was away. So why do you insist on putting up such a front? Can't you see that it's so obvious and ridiculous? Heh heh heh. The white rainbow dragon god let out a disdainful laugh. Devil Queen, I'm afraid that you have forgotten that your so-called Devil Master, Xianxia, would have died in some wasteland if our Dragon Queen hadn't decided to save him out of the great kindness of her heart. So where do you find the gall to say what? Crack. This thunderous cracking sound was so loud that it made everyone think that the Dragon Monarch had broken his own finger bones by clenching his fists too hard. The white rainbow dragon god's voice broke off abruptly as his body suddenly turned cold. He felt so cold that his entire body was shuddering, and he couldn't even find the wherewithal to continue his speech. Furthermore, this cold intent, one which penetrated straight to his dragon soul, was actually coming from the Dragon Monarch. The azure dragon god stepped forward and kicked the back of the white rainbow dragon god's calf. He was the only one among all the dragon gods who had managed to vaguely figure out something during this period of time. However, the Dragon Monarch had told him not to breathe a word to anyone, so how would he even dare to say anything? The white rainbow dragon god turned to look at him with a face filled with puzzled shock. Ha 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 ha! Kang Shishin's wild laughter rang through the air, and it matched his recently self-conferred title, Mad Dog. This time, his laughter was exceptionally wild and bold. What a joke! Who is the Devil Master? He is the person who inherited the heretic god's legacy before receiving the inheritance of a devil emperor. He is the person that the Sky Poison Pearl acknowledged as its master. This is a creation god, devil emperor, and a profound heavenly treasure we are talking about here. His profound strength is only at the level of a divine sovereign, but his devilish might can already be compared to a god emperor's strength. And he is barely over 30 years of age. Who exactly in this world can compare to him? Who would even deign to do so? The Dragon Monarch, ha 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 ha. In front of the Devil Master, he is nothing more than an old worm who has lived for 350,000 years. Anger had started to simmer on the faces of everyone from the Dragon God realm, but the Dragon Monarch's current emotional state was so strange that none of them dared to act impulsively. Kang Shishin continued, speaking of which, everyone in the God realm is aware of the 2 great beauties whose names have dominated the universe. The 2 celestial pearls of our world, the Dragon Queen and Goddess. The Goddess has already become the Devil Master's exclusive property. And the Dragon Queen, if the Devil Master had been born hundreds of thousands of years ago, do you think that you would even have gotten your turn, Dragon Monarch? I'm afraid that she'd rather be the Devil Master's concubine before she would even spare you a single glance. Bang. Dozens of kilometers of space violently swelled up with the Dragon Monarch at its center, and it looked like it was about to burst. The venerable withered dragons, dragon gods, and dragon sovereigns were all knocked backward by the blast of energy that had erupted from the Dragon Monarch's body. All of them immediately turned to look at him, and they were frozen in place by what they saw. Long Bai's fair face had actually turned a ghastly shade of greenish-black, and his lips, nostrils, eyebrows, and every single muscle on his face was violently trembling. The space around him violently twisted, and if he lost control of that dreadful rage of his, he would cause all of the space around him to collapse. "My lord," the pure dragon god said with a frown on her face. As the monarch of the primal chaos, thousands of years could pass before Long Bai would even show a hint of shock, so she had never ever seen him like this before. Everyone knew that the Dragon Queen was the Dragon Monarch's reverse scale, something that should never be touched, but a few taunting words certainly shouldn't have resulted in this. When he saw the dramatically changed expression on the Dragon Monarch's face and his barely contained rage, Kang Shishin was left stunned for several moments. But after that, it was time for his own eyes to widen dramatically as his lips twitched, and he started to laugh like a madman. Those words had merely been a message that Kai Wyo had sent to him via sound transmission. He had originally thought that mentioning the Dragon Queen might prick Long Bai, but even the smallest prick would have left him satisfied. He had never imagined that the Grand Dragon Monarch would actually be so enraged that he'd show such an ugly appearance. He lifted both hands up and arched them into claws. His eyes and nostrils were flaring in excitement as he doubled over in laughter. He was laughing so hard that he looked like he was about to pass out. However, he did not know that every single word that he had said just now was like the most poisonous blade in the world to the Dragon Monarch, and every one of these poisonous blades had struck him in a place that couldn't be touched by anyone. Kang Shishin's wild laughter was simply far too grating. Long Yi gave a short sigh of disappointment before saying, "Dragon Monarch, do not lose your dignity." Long Wu's words were also filled with disappointment. As the Dragon Monarch, you must not be fazed by even 1,000 calamities. These are merely the filthy words of a lowly person, so why did you have to react in such a manner? You bastard! The Cyan Abyss Dragon howled in rage as he shot forward, the image of a cyan claw appearing over his right hand. However, a pale white palm suddenly appeared in front of him and caught him right before he could attack. Astonishingly enough, the one who had stopped him was Long Bai. Space stopped distorting around him as his face regained its usual composure. However, the arm that had stopped the Cyan Abyss Dragon God was shaking with an extremely shocking amount of power. The Cyan Abyss Dragon God hurriedly retreated a few steps. He would no longer dare to make any impulsive moves. As he let his arm fall, Long Bai looked down at the Devil Queen once more. Divine light that resembled the scorching rays of a heavenly sun shone from his eyes. "Where is Yun Qi?" His words were calm, and his emotions were inscrutable. There is no need for the Dragon Monarch to be so apprehensive," Kai Wyo said in a languid voice. "I can honestly tell you that my Lord Devil Master is still very far away, even though he is rushing over with all his might. He was simply too far away, so he will need at least another 10 to 12 hours to rush back. That's why I have to say that your plan to avoid our Lord Devil Master was very successful. You've bought yourself a full 10 to 12 hours of time. However, I really want to see..." Kai Wyo's voice suddenly turned cold and flat as the black mist around her spiraled, and the entire area around her turned dark and cold. "Just what you, the Dragon Monarch, can accomplish in this time. HMPH. After he let out an incredibly cold snort of disdain, Long Bai looked down on the deep-sea divine region, and the might radiating from his eyes threatened to overturn the heavens themselves. "Fine, very good, then I will wait 12 hours for him." When he said those words, the profound practitioners on both sides simply froze in place. "My Lord Dragon Monarch," the Crimson Destruction Dragon God exclaimed as he swiveled around to face him. "The Devil Queen's heart is like a venomous abyss, and her words are misleading and bewitching. Don't let yourself be... Shut up." That mild rebuke instantly caused the Crimson Destruction Dragon God to clam up. Even though Long Bai's voice had been calm and dry, it sent a chill coursing through his heart and soul. "Do you think that a mere Devil Queen is capable of bewitching me?" The Crimson Destruction Dragon God's body became as tense as a bowstring as he anxiously replied, "No, I meant no such thing. Dragon Monarch," Long Yi started to speak, but he was also cut off by Long Bai. "There is no need for any more words," Long Bai said in a voice that had started to turn grim. "It isn't worth sullying the name of our Dragon God race over these dark wretches. Since they think that I am afraid of their so-called Devil Master, then I will wait for him to crawl out of his hole. The Dragon Monarch is right." The myriad manifestation God Emperor reacted the quickest, and his voice chimed out in agreement. "These dark wretches are merely dark wretches in the end. Even if we have to wait 1,200 hours rather than 12 hours, what will they be able to accomplish?" "That's right," the Kai Dragon Emperor said. "Let's use these 12 hours to shatter the last bit of pride and dignity that they have. How can we allow a bunch of filthy devils to sully the name of the Dragon God realm?" Now that 2 God Emperors had agreed, no one else dared to say anything in the face of the Dragon Monarch's frightening aura. "Oh," Kai Wyo shot Long Bai a lazy glance. "Dragon Monarch, there is no need to push yourself for the sake of this pathetic bit of dignity. What if my Lord Devil Master skins you like a snake after he returns? Won't that be even more shameful and undignified? By the time that happens, it will be far too late to regret this decision. Long Bai didn't even spare her a single glance. He merely turned around and barked out coldly, "No one is to attack within the next 12 hours. Anyone who disobeys my command is to be executed." The Dragon Monarch's heavenly commandment hung in the air like a huge mountain. This dreadful and illogical imperial command had caused a frightened hush to fall over the forces of the Western Divine region. No one even dared to take a single step forward, much less attack. "What's going on?" the Jade Dragon God whispered. "Could the Dragon Monarch's soul have been invaded by the Devil Queen?" "That isn't possible," the Pure Dragon God replied. "However, the Dragon Monarch really is acting quite irrationally, and his temperament is rather strange. These dark wretches will definitely use these 12 hours to run away." "They won't," the Pure Dragon God replied with a calm confidence. "If they wanted to run away, they would have scattered far before we arrived instead of waiting for us in battle formation." "Don't think too much about it," the Azure Dragon God said. "There is definitely a deep meaning behind the Dragon Monarch's action. We should just simply obey." Long Bai's back faced the deep sea realm, his cold gaze scanning the sky. However, his hands still remained tensed, and he didn't seem to have relaxed them even once. He was afraid of Yun Qi. He was not Yun Qi's equal. What a ridiculous joke, what a ridiculous joke. He was going to prove to Yun Qi, to the world, and most importantly to Xianxia, that Yun Qi was far from his equal. He was only fit to struggle, cry, despair, and then die before him. That's right, I have to let him taste this world's cruelest pain and despair. I will destroy his body, trample his dignity, and destroy all of his dark wings and hopes. However, how could he possibly let Yun Qi taste this ultimate despair if he wasn't around to witness it? "Good." The dark mist around Kai Waiao stopped swirling as she said in a cold voice, "I hope that you won't regret this decision when my Lord Devil Master returns in 12 hours' time." After she said that, she simply turned around and left. "Devil Queen?" Xianxia and Heaven-Defying swiftly caught up to her, their eyes shining with ardent hope. All of the profound practitioners of the Northern Divine region were also looking at her as tidal waves crashed through their hearts. "Remain where you are and quietly await the Devil Master's return," Kai Waiao commanded in a voice so loud that even the Western Divine region profound practitioners could hear her words clearly. "Within the next 12 hours, no one is to make any moves without my explicit command." "Yes," all the profound practitioners of the North cried out in unison. 12 hours, those few simple words from the Devil Queen had actually created a crazy miracle. They had actually managed to coax another 12 hours from the Dragon Monarch, and it had been as easy as stealing candy from a baby. They were all too aware of what this 12 hours of time meant for the Northern region, and for the Devil Master who was still inside the eternal Heaven-Divine realm. "You remain here as well," Kai Waiao said to Xianxia and Heaven-Defying before her voice dropped to a whisper. "Do not do or say anything unnecessary this time. We want to avoid anything that might startle the enemy. Let's just allow these 12 hours to pass by quietly." Xianxia and Heaven-Defying nodded their heads in unison. Kang Shishan was just about to speak when Kai Waiao's voice rang in his ears. "Kang Shishan, you really didn't let me down. If the Devil Queen has any other instructions, please feel free to issue them." The flattery in Kang Shishan's words was obvious as he bowed at the waist. "Since I have already called myself the Devil Master's mad dog, then I am naturally the Devil Queen's mad dog as well." Now that things had come to this, he had fully thrown his lot in with Kai Waiao. Kai Waiao stared at the sky. The crack in the deep sea barrier that stretched out like a wound in the sky was shocking to see. Kang Shishan observed the expression on her face and seemed to understand something after that. He grinned and said, "The Devil Queen is simply brilliant. You set the barrier at 30% of its power to arouse the enemy's suspicion, and now that you have bought us another 12 hours of time, it is enough to secretly boost its power from 30% to 100%. After that we can." "No," Kai Waiao said. "Maintain the barrier without any changes. What you need to do next is to get the remaining 70% ready so that it can be unleashed in an instant." A puzzled look appeared on Kang Shishan's face. Kai Waiao's lips moved as she calmly whispered 4 words. Light immediately erupted from Kang Shishan's eyes as he crowed in delight. "The Devil Queen is brilliant. Oh, the Devil Queen is brilliant. Ha 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 ha." 9. Kang Shishan went to fulfill his orders, and he left a bunch of hapless sea gods and divine envoys in his wake. All of them immediately exchanged glances when he left, and one of the sea gods finally spoke out in a hushed voice. "What do we do?" The overflowing waters sea god currently lay in a puddle of his own blood right in front of them. He was barely even alive, and half of his body was currently buried in the ground. The sea god power in his body had already been forcibly retrieved, and he was currently in such a weakened state that he didn't even have the power to get to his own feet. Given Kang Shishin's current state of extreme madness, no one would dare to save the overflowing waters sea god without Kang Shishin's explicit command. If not, they might very well suffer the same fate as he did. "What else can we do?" another sea god replied with a helpless sigh. After that, he clenched his teeth and hissed, "Do we even have another choice?" Of course they didn't. Kai Waio's steps were slow and measured, and her fair face was calm and composed. However, her eyes unwittingly drifted towards the direction of the royal hall. She really wanted to go take a look at the eternal heaven pearl that Xianxia was in right now, but it was not meant to be. Even though it was covered by 7 isolating barriers, the enemy at their gate was the Dragon Monarch, his powerful servants, and the gathered god emperors of the West. The moment their attention was drawn toward that hall, it was more than possible that they would be able to detect the eternal heaven pearl. Kai-na Yinger's golden hair danced in the air as she arrived at Kai Waio's side. When she looked at Kai Waio's face, she saw a grim look of gloomy melancholy plastered on it, a look that was all too rare. "Do we have any other moves after this?" she asked. "We still have a very small one," Kai Waio replied, "but it probably won't even be able to make any difference. In the end, everything depends on that miracle occurring." After that, the two of them remained silent for a very long time. Previously, all of them had wanted to dampen the raging fire in Xianxia's heart so that he wouldn't pursue his revenge at all costs and continuously put his life on the line in that undertaking. However, they were now fervently hoping that he would leave the eternal Heaven-Defying realm early because of that trademark impatience and impulsiveness of his. A gentle and fragrant breeze brushed past them as Keiji's delicate figure landed in front of the two women. After that, she raised her head to look at Kai Waio before asking in a very sincere voice, "How did you do it?" A faint smile appeared on Kai Waio's face. "The circumstances behind the current situation are very complicated, and it'll be hard to explain everything to you in the short time that we have. Furthermore, you're still small, so it would be better if you didn't delve too deeply into this matter." Kai Waio immediately realized that she had made a mistake. After a short pause, she said, "When I said small, I meant your age. If you don't want to tell me, then forget it." Keiji turned away from them and prepared to leave. Kai-na Yinger suddenly spoke in a cold voice. "Your beloved husband slept with someone's dragon queen, and he did it in the dragon god realm for 1 whole year. It's that simple." Keiji's starry eyes widened as she fell into a stunned silence. "HMPH?" Kai-na Yinger gave a soft snort of disdain. "Just as expected, the more holy and pure a woman looks, the more likely she is to be a slut." Her words were filled with barely contained venom. She could still overlook the part that Xianxia had to play in the desperate straits they currently found themselves in, but she had no qualms about blaming that dragon queen. Keiji turned to stare at her coldly. That's still nothing compared to the so-called goddess who has been violated more than 6,000 times. Kai-na Yinger's golden eyes narrowed as she said, "Oh, it seems like you've improved. Can the two of you give it a rest for now, especially during a time like this?" Kai Waio said as she pressed her fingers against her temples. She explained to Keiji, "Long Bai did not forcefully conscript all of the divine masters of the Western Divine Region's king realms, awaken the venerable withered dragons, and activate the world dragon city to eliminate the devils of the north in one fell swoop. His main motive is to vent his hatred and jealousy on Xianxia. As such, we aroused that deep-seated hatred and jealousy to the point where he nearly lost control of himself, and told him that Xianxia would return in about 10 to 12 hours' time. As a result, he will obediently wait until that time has passed. After all, if he can't rip us to shreds in front of Xianxia, the joy he will derive from venting his hatred will be greatly reduced." Keiji's chest violently heaved for a while before her body finally stiffened, and she asked, "Why didn't you add more hours to that?" "Going beyond the limits of plausibility is worse than falling short," Kai-na Yinger replied. "I don't recall asking you a question," Keiji coldly rebuked her. "Letter 2C9 Macron?" "Tusk," Kai-na Yinger pouted. Kai Waio calmly replied, "A day has 20-hour hours and 12 hours is exactly half that number." It is a balanced number that will unconsciously seem reasonable to anyone who hears it. Even though it isn't a short period of time, it's something that everyone can easily swallow. If we tried to be greedy, we might very well elicit the opposite of the response we were hoping for. Keijai didn't understand that explanation at all. Keijai, Kai Waiao said in a gentle voice, 12 hours from now, a fierce battle will definitely begin. At that time, we will need to rely heavily on the dragons of absolute beginning. You don't need to remind me, Keijai said. Even though this was tantamount to sending the dragons of absolute beginning to their deaths, the desperate straits that they found themselves in brooked no soft-heartedness. However, I have a request that the both of you must agree to. Oh, Kai Waiao said as she looked at her, you must leave Zhou Xuzi to me. Her grim voice and cold eyes contained a determination that could not be overruled along with a bone-piercing hatred. Okay, Kai Waiao said with a small nod of her head. ROA. A dragon's cry shook the air as purple light vanished. It was almost as if the huge and boundless eternal Heaven-Defying realm had just endured a gigantic calamity. Every inch of space inside of this realm was shaking violently, and this continued unabated for a very long time. You did it! Big brother Xianxia, you did it! A girl's delighted voice rang in the air like heavenly music as Shui Meiyan threw herself at Xianxia in glee. Two long and lustrous white legs circled around his waist as a pair of jade arms hugged his neck tightly. She was so happy that she was unwilling to let go. Hugh! After Xianxia let out a long breath, he opened his eyes. He didn't care about the sweat that covered his body and face, and the smile he wore was the brightest it had been since he had entered the eternal Heaven-Defying realm. He had done it. He had finally done it. If he had tried to do this before he entered the eternal Heaven-Defying realm, he would definitely have had to pay for it with his life. But today, he could finally use it for the first time without its burden, exceeding the limits of his soul. He had only used 2 years to accomplish it. This was great news. If things were like this, he wrapped both arms around Shui Meiyan's slender waist as he closed his eyes in satisfaction. This is all thanks to you. If you weren't around, I wouldn't be able to accomplish this even if I had 100 years. As if, Big Brother Xianxia is the awesome one, and I've always belonged to you in the first place. Shui Meiyan's voice turned soft and cottony, and clouds of red stained her face and her neck. Ah, she cried out softly in shock as Xianxia suddenly pressed her to the ground. A lascivious grin appeared on Xianxia's face as he stared at her like a hungry wolf. Then how should I thank my little Meiyan? Shui Meiyan stuck out her tongue at him as she replied in a coquettish voice. You know, you're even more like a bad guy during times like these than you are as the big bad devil master of darkness. I've always been a bad guy. Xianxia's expression and gaze were growing lewder by the second. Furthermore, I'm much badder than you've ever imagined, and you're about to find out right now. As his upper body pressed down toward her, his violent movements caused the fist-sized, tricolored glazed sound stone to gently smack against Shui Meiyan's lustrous crescent-shaped collarbone before it bounced back and hit Xianxia in the jaw. Daddy, you must control your lower self. Yun Wuxin's childish voice rang in their ears, causing Xianxia, who was just about to act with his lower half, to freeze in place. Shui Meiyan pressed a tiny hand against her mouth as a PFFFFT escaped her lips. Xianxia picked up the fist-sized glazed sound stone and stared at it dazedly for a long while. What's wrong, big brother Xianxia? Shui Meiyan timidly asked him in a soft voice. Xianxia didn't know why he felt embarrassment burning on his face as he replied, I suddenly recalled something very important. Something very important. That's. Xianxia actually blushed as his lips twitched several times. After that, he finally managed to say, Back when we met in the Eternal Heaven God realm for the first time, you were 15 years old. In truth, you're actually only 4 years older than Wuxin. Shui Meiyan. So? Xianxia swallowed audibly before he continued. When everything is over and I bring you to see Wuxin, you must never ever let her know about that. Say that you're already over 3,000 years old. Shui Meiyan blinked a few times as she stared at the sincere, worried, and embarrassed look at Xianxia's face. A giggle escaped her lips again before she started laughing in earnest. It was only after a while had passed that she finally managed to compose herself and say, All right, I get it. Xianxia got to his feet before he even realized it. As he stared at the glazed sound stone in his head, he fell into another daze. Mommy also told me to tell you to watch out not to touch this glazed sound stone by accident when you're doing weird things with other aunties in the future. The words Yun Wuxin said when she introduced this red-colored glazed sound stone to him rang in his mind, causing a smile to appear unbidden on his lips. He suddenly said in a hushed voice, I feel as if Wuxin is shouting my name right now. It feels as if she wants me to leave this place sooner rather than later so I can reunite with her quickly. Shui Meiyin stood up and leaned against his shoulder. The eternal Heaven-Divine realm should be open for another 4 to 5 months. But if you're missing her that much, then we should leave earlier. We can also lessen the burden on big sister He Ling as well. Yeah. Yun Qi nodded his head before he gently let go of the glazed sound stone. We will cultivate for 3 more weeks before we leave. I should be able to perfectly control this skill by then. At that time, we'll leave this place early. To the profound practitioners of the northern divine region, these were the shortest 12 hours of their lives. They had practically passed in the blink of an eye. A miracle had not happened, and Kai Wao's eyes looked like 2 deep and dark abysses at the moment. This 10 directions deep sea realm is about to turn into an ocean of blood, Kai and I Yinger murmured. Don't forget what we discussed earlier, Kai Wao said as she gave Kai and I a deep and meaningful look before she started walking forward. Kai and I Yinger did not reply. The atmosphere was beginning to grow restless outside the deep sea barrier. My Lord Dragon Monarch, 12 hours have already passed, the Azure Dragon God said. Those quiet and desolate 12 hours had finally passed, and Long Bai, who had remained as still as a statue throughout, finally began to turn around slowly, his eyes sweeping across the east. Where is Yun Qi? He had only spoken 3 short words, but they were like dark clouds which covered the skies of the 10-direction deep sea realm and silently menaced it. The God realm is vast, and the Devil Master was in a place that is very far away. 10 to 12 hours were merely an estimate of mine. It is normal for there to be some discrepancy. Kai Wao's voice and figure seemed both near and far at the same time. Even though she was facing the Dragon Monarch's heavenly might, her voice was still as calm and tranquil as some devilish pool. Since the Dragon Monarch has already waited for 12 hours, what's a bit more time? Dragon Monarch, something is wrong with the situation. The pure dragon god suddenly said, if Yun Qi is truly rushing toward this place at full speed, he will definitely be releasing a large amount of energy and aura. However, I've been using our spies to monitor the southern divine region for the last few hours. And I've even gotten the ones in the southern part of the eastern divine region to do a quick scan of their areas. Despite sweeping over several star regions, none of them have found a trace of Yun Qi's aura. It is very likely that they are not waiting here for Yun Qi in the first place. This is the most plausible scenario. They use some strange means to find out about our movements. And that includes the existence of the World Dragon City and venerable withered dragons. After that, they realized that this fight wasn't winnable, so they decided to lay down their lives here to give Yun Qi enough time to escape back to the northern divine region. So they decided to use this method to stall for time. Even though the pure dragon god hadn't gotten the situation right, she had still correctly guessed most of it. Long Bai had long since regained his composure after his initial eruption of anger. However, since he had personally said that they would wait for 12 hours, his dignity as the Dragon Monarch would not allow him to go back on those words, even if he sensed that there was something wrong. However, these 12 hours had already passed, and his vast spiritual senses had not detected a single thread of Yun Qi's aura. As such, the words of the pure dragon god instantly reignited the fires of rage in his heart. You played me? The first person the Dragon Monarch turned to look at was Kai Wao. If the other person hadn't been the Devil Queen of the North, just that simple stare alone would have been enough to shake their soul. Hee. Kai Wao suddenly started laughing at this moment, and her laughter was both seductive and strange. After that, her voice suddenly turned incredibly cottony and languid as she said, Our Lord Devil Master has probably safely returned to the northern divine region by now, and you won't be able to catch him even if you use the World Dragon City. Long Bai's sword-shaped brows instantly sank. The Dragon Monarch's grand name has resounded like thunder in our ears for millennia. However, it turns out that you're actually nothing more than an idiot and a fool. I merely said a few words, and it got you to sit there quietly for 12 whole hours. Even the pets that I rear in my devilish pool are not as obedient as you are. Long Bai's face remained impassive, but the words that Kai Wao were about to say would instantly cause heavenly lightning to erupt from him. Ah, you're such a fool, so it's no wonder that the Dragon Queen gifted you a shiny green hat. Buzzz. Everyone felt as if a million bolts of lightning had exploded in their heads at the same time. Long Bai's face instantly turned a ghastly shade of blackish green as his eyes widened to the size of saucers. Boom. Space collapsed around him as his raging draconic energy erupted from his body along with his boundless rage. The dragon gods, dragon sovereigns, and even the venerable withered dragons were violently knocked away by the backlash from this energy eruption. Furthermore, Long Bai, the monarch of the dragon gods, the commander of the Western Divine region, had actually attacked. As everyone looked on in helpless disbelief, his energy exploded towards the barrier. An earth-shaking explosion rang through the air as his claw heavily smashed against the tattered deep-sea barrier. Bang! Crack! One blow. Just a single blow had caused the deep-sea barrier to collapse. That attack had contained the most dreadful and powerful force in the universe, and the blue sky covering the deep-sea divine region instantly shattered into fragments. A huge pale white claw appeared over Long Bai's right arm as it bore down toward Kai Waiao with peerlessly dreadful draconic might and malice. No one had even recovered from the dazed shock elicited by Kai Waiao's words, so there was no way that they would be ready for the Dragon Monarch's sudden attack. However, Kai Waiao had already been prepared for it, and her devilish figure silently flew forward. Boom! The Dragon Monarch had finally attacked, and even the flick of his fingers seemed to be able to create a heavenly calamity. Countless holes were instantly gouged out in the ground of the deep-sea divine region, and an entire host of devils were blasted far away. As destruction raged around her, Kai Waiao's afterimages were instantly destroyed, and her real body coalesced into existence in the skies above her. She shouted, "Open!" Ding! The fragments of the deep-sea barrier were chaotically fluttering in the air, but they suddenly glowed with an extremely dense blue light that started to rapidly spread. When the dazed dragon gods saw that blue light, they were shocked at first. But after that, their expressions immediately changed as they crazily charged forward and yelled, "Dragon Monarch!" However, for the last 12 hours, no one had seen hide nor hair of Kang Shishin. This was because he had been in the core of the deep-sea divine region, rigidly controlling the deep-sea barrier's power. Just as Kai Waiao had instructed, he had maintained it in a state where it could be instantly released at any moment. Bang! The deep-sea barrier coalesced into existence once more, firmly sealing the deep-sea divine region within. The 8 dragon god who had rushed forward violently smacked into the newly reopened deep-sea barrier. The dazed and confused Western Divine Region profound practitioners were standing outside the barrier, while the raging Long Bai was inside of it. The commander-in-chief of the entire Western Divine Region had been isolated from his troops just like that. Kai Waiao's heart-piercingly cold voice rang out from above him. "Attack!" Heart-rending devilish cries rang through the air as the light in the area grew dim. In that instant, Yan 1, Yan 2, Yan 3, Yan Xianxia, Jai Xin, and Jai Ling attacked Long Bai simultaneously. Behind them, the powers of Qianai Yinger, Qianai Bingzhu, Qianai Wugu, and Gu Zhu's power erupted dramatically as they joined in the attack as well. 3 had received instructions from Kai Waiao long before this happened. They were also the fastest to reach and attack Long Bai. The pair of black claws that terrorized the southern and the eastern divine regions flew toward the Dragon Monarch's left and right sides. The sound and sensation of the deep-sea barrier closing jolted Long Bai out of his rampage. At the same time, he realized that he had been duped by Kai Waiao again. A faint white light appeared from his body. Boom! Yan 1 and Yan 3's claws struck Long Bai ruthlessly. The sound of breaking bones was so clear that some people thought that it had come from their own bodies. The profound rock Long Bai was standing on shattered, and the space behind him collapsed. However, he didn't move an inch from where he was, and he stared at his attackers with terrifying authority and indifference. Yan 1's fingers were bent. Yan 3's right arm was straight up dislocated. A level of recoil far beyond their wildest imaginations had sent them flying away from Long Bai. Right after that, Jai Xin, Jai Ling, Qianai Yinger, Gu Zhu, and the 2 Brahma ancestors' power reached Long Bai. Long Bai raised his white, glowing right arm. It took him only an instant to complete the simple movement, but for some reason it appeared unnaturally slow to everyone who saw it. Then, he casually thrust his palm forward. Long Bai was probably the only being in the entire world who possessed the strength to knock back 2 Yama ancestors by brute force. Even so, he should need a moment to gather his strength after that. However, the energy releasing from his right arm was a draconic aura that stifled everyone's breath at the same time. A half-transparent, pale white image of a dragon gushed forward. The world shook beneath a soul-shaking roar. 4 level 10 divine masters, Jai Xin, Jai Ling, Kaianai Yinger, and Gu Zhu were stopped in their tracks just like that. They couldn't move even an inch closer to Long Bai. On the other hand, Kaianai Wugu and Kaianai Bingzhu fared better and were halted for only a moment. Once they had regained their freedom, they charged the Dragon Monarch again and pressed two golden glowing palms on his head. High up in the sky, Yan Xianxia summoned a pitch-black Yama spear that grew from 3 meters long to 300 meters long in an instant. By the time he reached Long Bai, it had grown to 3 kilometers long. Rumble the World shone a shade of gold and black for a moment. The Yama spear shattered into pieces, and a supernova-like explosion dropped the 2 Brahma ancestors like flies. Even Long Bai was sent flying until his back struck the deep-sea barrier. The air suddenly turned incredibly oppressive. The battle had begun and come to a lull in just an instant. The northern region profound practitioners' joy of having imprisoned. The Dragon Monarch had also lasted only an instant. All they felt now was a level of shock that could tear the soul apart. It was because the combined strength of some of the strongest powers in the entire northern divine region. The Yama ancestors, Yan Xianxia, the 2 Brahma ancestors, and 4 level 10 divine masters, had only succeeded in knocking Long Bai back. Meanwhile, the Dragon Monarch felt the deep sea barrier behind his back and snorted quietly. A realm-protecting barrier was used to defend against an invader's attack, or, in the worst-case scenario, buy enough time for its denizens to escape. Therefore, it was usually set so that it prevented entry, but allowed exit. The deep-sea barrier written in the records was no different. The earlier barrier was obviously a one-way barrier as well. However, during its second activation, it had suddenly transformed into a two-way barrier now preventing both entry and exit. 12 hours ago, when cracks first appeared on the deep-sea barrier, he had already felt that something was amiss. Although he had never witnessed the true deep-sea barrier with his own eyes, the records had stated that it was the strongest defensive barrier in the entire southern divine region. While it was impressive that it had blocked the full-powered attacks of hundreds of divine masters for as long as it did, it still didn't feel like it had lived up to its reputation. However, he hadn't thought deeply into it because Kai Weiao had distracted him at the time. Obviously, he now knew why the deep-sea barrier had broken as easily as it did. A perfect flaw, followed by a perfect transmutation of attributes. It looked like the seemingly pretentious claim that the deep-sea divine power was infinitely flexible was true after all. After that, Long Bai looked up and stared at Kai Weiao, the one person who had stayed out of this fight. Now that he was in full possession of his faculties once more, he realized that she had led him by the nose almost every step of the way. Rumble, the 8 dragon gods attacked the deep-sea barrier at the same time, but this new barrier was clearly a lot stronger than the previous iteration. Even their combined strength had only managed to dent it a little. "Everyone attack!" the Crimson Destruction Dragon God shouted. The Dragon Sovereigns, Master Dragons, and the Divine Masters of the 5 King Realms responded affirmatively and attacked in unison. Divine Master energy started beating down on the barrier like a galactic storm. Crack! Back inside the barrier, Yan 3 relocated his arm back to normal while glaring at Long Bai with shining black eyes. It didn't feel like he had struck a body earlier. More accurately speaking, he hadn't thought a body this tough even existed until just now. Yan 1 fared better than Yan 3, but his hands felt numb. His eyes were shining with the same terrifying light as Yan 3. Even Kaianai Wugu and Kaianai Bingzhu, the 2 divine masters who knew Long Bai better than anyone else in the northern region faction, were shaken. No one doubted that the Dragon Monarch was strong. The problem was that no one knew where his true limits lay. It had been countless years since he had fought anyone seriously. It was because he had become the strongest as far back as 150,000 years ago. Of course, Long Bai's monstrous strength hadn't manifested out of thin air, and Xianxia sat at the heart of his ascension. Soul-wise, his drive for power stemmed directly from his obsession with Xianxia. Body-wise, he had the privilege of using the divine water of life, a miraculous substance that could transform a powerless mortal into a divine origin profound practitioner with a single drop, for hundreds of thousands of years. In fact, one might even say that Xianxia was the one who made Long Bai into what he was today, not Long Bai himself. Unfortunately, "Do not give him even a moment to breathe," Kai Weiao commanded. "We only have one shot at this. Don't save your strength just because he's one person. Hit him with everything you have." A few years ago, when Jasmine had awakened as the evil infant, she had single-handedly killed the Moon God Emperor, the star gods, the moon gods, the Brahma kings, and the guardians before escaping safely. She had been undefeatable despite being at the lowest point of her strength. In terms of power, the Dragon Monarch was the closest profound practitioner to that level. In terms of body, he might actually be tougher than Jasmine at that time. Therefore, she had no idea if her trap, one that would have killed absolutely anyone else in the entire primal chaos, was enough to kill Long Bai before the barrier shattered. The odds were, to put it simply, impossible to calculate. But gamble she must, for the only other alternative was annihilation. The Devil Queen's voice wiped out the northern region's profound practitioner's shock and replaced it with violent determination. If they could slay the Dragon Monarch right here and now, the enemy forces would fall into chaos for sure. It was the ray of a miracle the Devil Queen had schemed with all her might to obtain, so they couldn't let it slip through their hands no matter what. Dai, the first attacker, was still Yan 1. He was the greatest Yama ancestor of the northern divine region, and his pride was just as lofty. The shame of being sent flying in a single exchange burned against his skin like a brand. Behind him, the witches, moon eaters, and Yama devils unleashed their powers as well. Some distance away, the god Emperor Kang Shishin laughed madly. "How do you like my magic trick, Western Divine Region? I just turned your Dragon Monarch into a deep-sea turtle. Wahahaha! Bomcrack. Kajai raised the Heavenly Wolf Devil Sword and unleashed a wave of spatial energy from the tip. The next moment, hundreds of dragons of Absolute Beginning descended from the sky, and the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning himself appeared beneath Kajai's feet. The aura the Dragon Emperor was emanating shocked even the Western region dragons. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the Northern Divine Region had squeezed out every ounce of strength they possessed to kill Long Bai. Their manic determination deeply disturbed the dragon gods of the Dragon God realm and drove them to attack the deep-sea barrier with even greater frenzy than before. But the 5 venerable withered dragons still didn't make a move. Long Bai's hair swam messily behind his back, and a white film had glazed over his pupils. No matter how powerful he was, he couldn't possibly withstand the full strength of the Northern Region forces on his own. Therefore, he, the Dragon Monarch, made the most logical and correct decision. Roar boom! A draconic roar that nearly knocked everyone unconscious rocked the blue sky of the Southern Divine Region, and the world trembled. The world suddenly turned darker for no reason. The dragons of Absolute Beginning stiffened and sank almost 100 meters before they barely regathered themselves. Even the dragon gods, Kai dragons, Hui dragons, and blue dragons attacking the deep-sea barrier suddenly lost control of their power and shivered uncontrollably. His body was over 30,000 meters long, his scales were pure white, and his eyes looked like a pair of burning suns. The draconic aura that was already unparalleled in this world actually grew several times stronger than before. Rumble, rumble! The white dragon slowly descended from the sky. Unnatural, disastrous storms appeared here, and there without warning. Space shivered to the point where it felt like countless bolts of lightning were striking endlessly against the world. Yan 1 and Yan 3 froze in midair. The Yama devils and moon eaters who were about to pounce on the Dragon Monarch backed away like a typhoon had hit them. Even Kaianai Wugu and Kaianai Bingju, 2 old men who had lived so long that few things could surprise them anymore, stared blankly at the Dragon Monarch for a very long time. The Dragon Monarch's true form. It was the form that they had never seen even during their lifetimes. They were hardly the only ones who could make such a claim. Even the dragon gods hadn't seen his true form for the heavens only know how many years. It was impossible to accurately describe how it felt except that it literally caused heaven and earth to shiver. And it stunned even Yan 1 and Yan 3, 2 monsters who had lived in the Bone Sea abyss for 800,000 years, for a moment. Both devils had temporarily forgotten what they were supposed to do. Roar the moment the Dragon Monarch roared, more than half of the profound practitioners present thought that their bodies and souls had been crushed to smithereens. In fact, countless planets in the Southern Divine Region had strayed away from their original orbits. While everyone was stunned or near unconsciousness, the Dragon Monarch abruptly escaped the aura lockdown he was under and flew toward the back. Roar, another draconic roar followed, but this time it came from the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning himself. It flew straight toward Long Bai. Bang! The 2 giant beings collided against one another and caused a series of heart-wrenching noises that sounded like thousands of dragon bones breaking at the same time. An instant later, the Dragon Emperor of Absolute beginning dropped toward the ground like a lightning bolt, and the Dragon Monarch brought his claws downward. The shadow it cast enveloped the entire Burning Moon realm entourage. "Fly," Fen-Deaki roared, but he himself couldn't move because he was trapped at the center of the Dragon Monarch's power. He felt as if a million mountains were trapping him in place, pupils widening to their limits. He channeled his full power and thrust his arms upward in an attempt to resist the attack, even though he knew that his struggle was futile. "Be safe, Senior Deaki." Suddenly, a profound practitioner reached Fen-Deaki and hit him with a palm strike, sending the old man flying and out of harm's way. Unfortunately, he also put himself directly in the way of the Dragon Monarch's claw. Boom! Jai-Deopian was smashed deep into the ground, his arms breaking like twigs before the unstoppable force. The Moon Eaters who just barely flew out of the way were still knocked flying, some several kilometers and some dozens. When they finally regained their bearings and looked back, they saw something that caused their eyes to turn red with rage. Squelch, the claw pushed harder, and Jai-Deopian exploded in a shower of blood. Just like that, Jai-Deopian, one of the Moon Eaters of Burning Moon Realm, a level 8 divine master, was crushed to death by the Dragon Monarch. He was barely able to put up any resistance at all. Shock, fear, cold. All these feelings were spreading inside the hearts of the northern region profound practitioners at an insane rate. The core strength of the northern divine region had swept the eastern and southern divine regions like an unstoppable storm. The Yama ancestors and Brahma ancestors especially were existences who surpassed a large majority of god emperors in the current world. These people had joined together to attack one person and one person only. But not only had said person defeated the powerful Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning in one hit, he had scattered the Moon Eaters and the Burning Moon Divine Envoys in a single hit. One Moon Eater was even crushed with barely any resistance. This wasn't the outcome they had imagined when they trapped Long Bai in with them. Everyone knew that Dragon Monarch was strong, but how could he be this powerful? The world darkened once more. This time, Long Bai dropped his talons atop the Yama Devils. It was a pressure like nothing the terrified Yama Devils and Yama Ghosts had ever imagined before, much less felt with their own persons. It was like the 9 heavens themselves were falling toward them. "Move away!" No one tried to defend or retaliate against the attack. Everyone from the Yama Devils to the Yama Ghosts did the first thing that entered their heads, and that was to escape with all their might. It was at this moment a new roar shook the heavens. A gigantic azure wolf descended from the sky and dashed straight toward Long Bai. It was a smoking Keijai swinging her heavenly wolf devil sword at Long Bai's talons. Rumble. Another explosion rocked the deep-sea god realm, and the azure wolf was shredded into pieces. Keijai herself was knocked as far back as 15 kilometers before she was finally able to come to a stop. Her efforts were not futile, however. The Yama forces were still scattered and wounded, but no one had died from the attack. In the sky, Kai Waiao narrowed her eyes to slits. She was staring at something far scarier than his true physical form. His dragon god divine soul. The strength of a dragon god's soul lay in its ability to awe its opponents. It could shatter a person's fighting spirit and willpower instantly, turn their fear into all-encompassing terror, and even invoke a sense of compulsive submission. Whether or not the person had truly submitted to the awe, it would be incredibly difficult for them to renew their will and strength. The Yama ancestors and Brahma ancestors were staggered to the point where they allowed Long Bai to escape their control without struggle. The Moon Eaters and Yama Devils completely lost their will to resist and focused all their strength on escaping. The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning, the most affected of them all, couldn't even unleash 30% of its true power. That was why it had collapsed immediately after slamming into the Dragon Monarch. This was the power of a dragon god's dragon soul, and the Devil Queen knew this better than most, because she had personally experienced it herself while fighting against the Crimson Destruction Dragon God. The Dragon God had been able to injure her severely even though his soul was a tattered mess at the time. It also made her realize all over again just how amazing Xianxia was to suppress the Ash Dragon God and kill him like it was nothing. Although terrifying would be a more apt descriptor. It might very well be the reason he never feared the Dragon God realm. Back at the Blue Pole Star, Xianxia had crippled an entire group of god emperors with his Dragon God Divine Soul and escaped despite being only at Divine King realm. Xianxia's Dragon God Divine Soul had come from the primordial Azure Dragon himself, a being that was absolutely on a higher level than Long Bai. However, his soul energy was so weak that the awe didn't last very long. On the other hand, Long Bai's dragon god divine soul was no match for Xianxia's, but it was still enough to subdue absolutely everything in his wake, not to mention that his soul energy was as vast as a boundless sea. It was impossible to estimate exactly how long the awe would last. Kai Waio's pupils slowly darkened into the deepest black. If Shui Meiyan was around, the divine stainless soul could have chased away the awe. If Xianxia was around, he might even be able to turn the tables on the Dragon Monarch himself and suppress him for a short moment. Unfortunately, neither of them was present right now. Her Nirvana Devil soul was a high-level soul too, but its true strength lay in its ability to cripple and control a soul. Considering the situation, it wasn't the best use of her soul, but she had no choice but to expel the aw's effects through level suppression, and hope it was enough. Kai Waio's eyes closed slowly before opening abruptly. A twisted devil's shadow appeared in her widened pupils. Eerily, the devil's shadow appeared in everyone else's pupils, minds and souls as well. Then Kai Waio whispered in a hoarse and distant voice, "In this world, the only power deserving of your awe is the Devil Master. Long Bai is but another dragon on his kill list." Kai Waio's voice reverberated inside their souls like a devilish gong, chased away the fear in their eyes, and reignited their faith and fighting spirit. "Hiss, AH!" Yanwan abruptly let out an ear-piercing shriek and pounced toward Long Bai like a crazed demon. For a few breaths, Long Bai had intimidated him and caused his hold to slacken. It was only a few breaths, but it was one of the worst humiliations he had ever suffered in his life. Kai Waio's soul voice rang again in everyone's ears. "Kaianai Guju, Kang Shishin, suppress him with all your power. Yan 1, Yan 3, Yama Emperor, Yan Wu, you're the attackers. Keijai, tell the dragons of Absolute beginning to fall back for now. Witches, prepare the prison. Everyone else back away and stay out of this fight." The orders were long, but they were transmitted instantly thanks to her soul voice. If everyone were to attack Long Bai together, of course they would have a higher chance of slaying him before the barrier shattered. However, the first thing Long Bai did after unleashing his true form and escaping the suppression was to attack the Moon Eaters and Yama Devils. It was obvious that he intended to take as many of them with him to the grave as possible. After some quick deliberation, Kai Waio ultimately decided to preserve her forces and attack Long Bai with only the level 10 Divine Masters. Yan 1 and Yan 3 tried dashing toward the White Dragon, but all they got was a faceful of tail. The outcome of the second clash between the Dragon Monarch and the two Yama ancestors was exactly the same as the first. Yan 1 and Yan 3 bouncing away like a pair of balls. This time, though, the two Yama ancestors were very, very angry. "You think you're the only one who knows how to transform?" Yan 1 damned near crushed his own teeth as he snarled. "Watch, HISSHAHHH!" Yan 1 and Yan 3 let out another ear-piercing screech. Their withered bones suddenly pierced through their skin, and black fog poured out of their backs. A moment later, both Yama ancestors transformed into a giant, near-physical devil that was at least 300 meters tall. Right now, their appearance was incredibly similar to the ancient Yama devils recorded in the history books of the northern divine region. "I'll tear you apart." The howls became several times more terrifying than before. Their claws also became imbued with the destructive power of the Bone Sea Abyss. Shred. Both claws struck Long Bai a third time. But instead of the usual explosion, a cacophony of screeches shrill enough to cause a heart to explode scratched against everyone's eardrums. It was the sound of the Dragon Monarch's flesh being shredded. The ghastly claws entered Long Bai's flesh from one side and came out the other. Several jets of blood gushed out of the open wounds. The wounds were really insignificant considering how huge Long Bai was. But when was the last time his blood was exposed to the naked air? Not even Long Bai himself could remember a time like this. There were just so few people in the world who possessed the power to make him bleed, much less anything else. "Dragon Monarch!" Outside the barrier, the terrified dragon gods attacked even harder after witnessing the impossible sight. The deep-sea barrier quaked and dented under their power practically every passing instant. Long Bai's retaliation was immediate and deadly. His white glowing tail cut a hole in space and slammed into Yan 1 and Yan 3 hard, sending them rolling across space at an unimaginable speed. However, the two Yama ancestors returned even quicker and more hateful than before, pouncing toward the Dragon Monarch again. Kaianai Wugu, Kaianai Bingju, and Guju also swooped down from above and struck Long Bai with all their power. The Dragon Monarch's power was peerless in the world, but even he found it difficult to endure a direct hit from the two Yama ancestors. He abruptly descended 3 kilometers or so before glaring at the sky and roaring once more. Roar the second the power pushing down on his body lessened. Long Bai immediately flew up once more and sent the 3 Brahma divine masters flying with a devastating storm of energy. Of the 3, Gu Zhu turned pale and failed to stop a trickle of blood from sliding down his lip. However, things were different this time. Thanks to Kai Waiao's Nirvana Devil Soul, they were able to regain their strength and mount a second attack just a couple of instants later. At the same time, Kaianai Yinger's Divine Oracle and Keijai's Heavenly Wolf Devil Sword cut through the air with a sonic boom. 5 divine masters' worth of destructive power struck Long Bai squarely in the head. Further below, Yan 1, Yan 3, Yan Xianxia, and Yan Wu were attacking his stomach like crazy as well. Even Kang Shishin had let out a sudden, mad cry, risen into the air, and fired a hail of sharp, blue arrows toward Long Bai's glaring eyes. Rumble, buzz, whoosh, shred. The Dragon Monarch, the Yama ancestors, the Brahma ancestors, the Yama Emperor, the Devil Queen, God Emperor Shishin. It was a battle no mortal would ever be able to see with their own eyes. It was because even the tiniest shockwave from this battle could easily destroy a star. In fact, every instant, every fraction of a second of this battle was collapsing an unimaginable amount of space. Again and again, the northern region profound practitioners taking cover in the deep-sea god realm were knocked back by the shockwaves of the battle. By the time they regained their balance, they realized that they were a couple 100 kilometers away from the center of the battlefield. They stared blankly at the battle above their heads. They almost couldn't believe that there existed a battle where they, powerful divine masters, were unqualified to participate. Even outside the deep-sea barrier, a huge number of Western region profound practitioners were so focused on the battle that they had forgotten to attack the barrier. The dragon race was the greatest race of all races, and they of course possessed their own unique profound arts and profound skills. However, the stronger a dragon, the less they actually practiced them. As for the Dragon Monarch, he almost couldn't remember the techniques he had once engraved into his memory. It was because both his body and his soul stood at the pinnacle of the world. Profound arts and profound skills were only burdens to him. After all, his bloodline, his body, his power, and his soul were the strongest profound arts in the entire world. That being said, no matter how powerful Long Bai was, there was no way he could fight off the northern region's strongest forces all by himself. The suppression grew worse and worse. He continued taking hits from the Brahma divine masters and Yama devils. However, his draconic aura never weakened or fell into disorder in the slightest, and his retaliations were as fierce as they were deadly. It was a testament to the Dragon Monarch's true power. He didn't lose even though he was suppressed for a very long time. Outside the barrier, Long Si let out a heavy sigh before saying, "His dragon's body and dragon's soul far surpass ours. His dragon's body especially may have surpassed the limit. He truly deserves to be called the Dragon Monarch." "Yet his dragon soul was still suppressed by the Devil Queen," said Long Yi while looking at the black shadow in the sky. "It looks like a lot of monsters have risen during the time we were asleep." "It is time we act," Long said. Boom, another huge, deafening explosion erupted from Long Bai and sent the Yama Emperor, Kaianai, and more flying. Long Bai was covered in wounds, but even the deepest one was only a meter or 2 deep. They hadn't even dug deep enough to see its bones yet. Long Bai abruptly turned around to hit the weakest Yan Wu. Yan Xianxia dashed toward Long Bai like a black meteor with the intent of scoring a quick hit, but the talons suddenly changed direction and pressed down on him instead. Caught off guard, Yan Xianxia took the full brunt of the attack. A terrifying blast of draconic energy burst through his chest and his back. Yan Xianxia's features twisted into an ugly visage, and his teeth nearly shattered under the sheer force he was exerting on them. In his hatred, not only did he not bother to suppress his wounds, he channeled his full power and struck the dragon talon with everything he had. Crack! It sounded as if 1,000 hills were crumbling. The dragon's monarch's talon broke under the retaliatory strike, but Yan Xianxia himself crashed deep into the ground while spewing blood. "Royal father!" Yan Wu let out a cry of horror and rushed to her father's aid. After Yan Xianxia rolled over to his back, he tapped his chest a couple of times with a finger and sealed the wound. When he looked up and saw a panicking Yan Wu flying toward him, he hit her with a gust of dark energy before shouting at her angrily, "Get him, not me." 2. Yan Wu gritted her teeth and allowed Yan Tianxiao's power to propel her straight toward Long Bai. She waved her hands and conjured tens of thousands of Yama devil spears in an instant. Breaking a dragon god's bone was a feat many times harder than just wounding a dragon god. Thanks to Yan Tianxiao's effort, Long Bai growled in pain and temporarily lost his balance. Roar, the heavenly wolf howled as Keijai changed her target. She successfully scored an impossibly heavy wild fang on Long Bai's broken talon. Crack! The heavenly wolf's power was strength-based, much like the dragon god's power. Yun Qi might not dare use too much strength in his hugs for fear of harming Keijai's soft and delicate body. But the small girl really possessed enough power to shatter stars and moons. That was how she was able to break Long Bai's talon in half and cause a snap that sounded like the profound lightning of the 9 heavens itself. Every dragon god turned as pale as a sheet when they heard this. Roar, the explosive power spun Long Bai's body around. Sensing an opportunity, Yan Wu abruptly changed her stance, gathered her aura, condensed the 10,000 Yama devil spears into a giant shadow that was 3 kilometers tall, and dropped it on the center of his glabella. It had been too long since he felt any pain, and the pain of his bones breaking finally broke through his calm facade and disrupted his aura. Moreover, he was unable to defend himself due to being off balance, so Yan Wu was able to land her giant spear perfectly. PSSH boom! The full-powered attack exploded and drilled a 3-meter-wide hole in Long Bai's glabella. Huge droplets of blood scattered through the air and toward the ground. At nearly the same time, a dancing Kang Shishin finally found an opportunity to land an effective attack. The blue, profound energy he had been holding all this time struck Long Bai's open, angered eyes perfectly. Again, Long Bai wasn't able to dodge it because the profound beam followed an unpredictable trajectory and was several times faster than anything Kang Shishin had unleashed before. Tui, what an amazingly despicable man, spat Yan 1 and Yan 3 in unison as they crawled to their feet. Truly shameless. Even Yan Tianxia was facepalming with one hand while suppressing his wounds with the other. Stabbing an opponent in the eyes was a technique even the lowest commoner found despicable, and this guy was a goddamn god emperor. Hiss! Roar! That being said, it was very effective. The eyes were one of the weakest parts of any living creature, and the dragons were not an exception to this rule. Even the Dragon Monarch couldn't help but lose his mind for a not insignificant amount of time after taking a god emperor's beam straight to the eyeballs. Furious and in pain, he couldn't maintain the same level of pressure he had been exerting upon all those who approached him, and inevitably put himself in greater danger. Shred. A golden beam erupted from behind Long Bai, and this time it pierced through Long Bai's disrupted protective aura like paper. It slithered around the dragon's tail and tightened like a deadly python before exploding. The horrifying noise of flesh being compressed to the point of bursting entered everyone's ears. A shower of blood erupted as the divine oracle sank deep into the Dragon Monarch's tail. Although Long Bai was covered in wounds before, he was able to maintain his cool because they were mostly superficial damage that didn't matter. Now, though, he was finally faltering before the full might of the northern divine region's best. He was angry, well and truly angry. If you lived in the god realm, you would know that you should never, ever make a dragon angry. Roar. The fury and power behind this roar was almost twice as strong as the previous one. It caused the approaching Yan 1, Yan 3, Kaianai Wugu and Kaianai Bingzhu to lose their strength instantly. As for Kaianai Yinger, not only was divine oracle blasted away from Long Bai's tail, the sheer amount of force that was transmitted through the weapon was powerful enough to bloody her hand and make her lose her grip. The closest people to Long Bai, Kang Shishin, Keijai, and Yan Wu, even blacked out for an instant as they were swept away like dead leaves in a hurricane. Boom, that wasn't the only terrible news. A deafening explosion had resounded from the deep sea barrier. It was the 5 venerable withered dragons finally joining the rescue effort. The 5 dragons had fired their draconic energy from several kilometers away, and they were all aiming at the same point. When the energies converged, the resulting explosion was so powerful that it left a shockingly huge depression and many tiny cracks on the deep sea barrier. Boom! The second time they attacked, the white cracks immediately widened and spread like spider webs. What? The sea god's eyes widened so much that their eyeballs could have fallen out of their sockets. When it came to breaching a barrier, the quality of power mattered far more than the quantity of power. For example, on the day the heaven-smiting Devil Emperor had left the primal chaos, Jasmine had been able to wipe out the crimson crack on the wall of primal chaos much faster than all the god emperors combined. This meant that the 5 venerable withered dragons' power level was above the deep-sea barriers. Not only that, they shared the same style and origin of power. Their combined energies produced a synergistic effect that was absolutely deadly to the deep-sea barrier. On the other side of the barrier, Long Bai didn't beat down on his attackers despite having physically and figuratively stunned all of them with the unimaginable power of a dragon's fury. Instead, he flew straight toward Kai Waiao. It was because he knew that she was the heart of the entire assault. If she hadn't canceled the awing effects of his dragon soul again and again, he wouldn't have faltered nearly as quickly. "Watch out, Devil Queen!" Yan Xianxia shouted. Kai Waiao currently had her eyes closed, and the shadow above her head was swaying unsteadily. She was just getting ready to expel Long Bai's unnaturally powerful All by force. However, because she was fully focused on controlling the Nirvana Devil Soul at the time, she was slow to react to Long Bai's sudden attack. She lashed out with her black ribbon, but couldn't unleash even half of her normal strength. As a result, the attack bounced away, and she took a blast of draconic energy straight to the body. P-whack! More than half of the black mist surrounding Kai Waiao crumbled into nothing. The amount of blood that burst out of her lips was absolutely terrifying. Her aura also fell into incredible disorder. Obviously, dispelling the dragon soul's awe with the Nirvana Devil Soul again and again wasn't an easy task. "Devil Queen! Devil Queen!" Cries of shock and terror appeared from every corner of the deep-sea god realm. If the unthinkable were to happen to the Devil Queen while the Devil Master was gone, they didn't even dare to imagine the consequences. Eyes widening to the point of bleeding, Yan Xianxia endured his wounds, forced his way through the awe and suppression of Long Bai's roar, and charged. Equally shocked by Kai Waiao's injuries, Yan 1, Yan 3, and the 2 Brahma ancestors charged toward Long Bai as well. Long Bai turned around to face them. His eyes were wounded, but they still shone with a light that cowed all the living creatures in the world. The line between his body and his soul blurred for a moment, and another draconic roar pressed down on everyone. This time, the Devil Queen wasn't around to help. The northern region devils were sure to break under his dragon soul. It was at this moment Kai Waiao's pupils gleamed eerily. She had purposely taken a hit to prepare for this very moment. The second Long Bai released his dragon soul, Kai Waiao captured its outline perfectly in her pupils. The seemingly weakened Nirvana Devil Soul immediately unleashed its hidden power, shot toward Long Bai's soul, and bit. "Roa, Ch. The Crimson Destruction Dragon God hadn't been able to withstand the pain of the Nirvana Devil Soul tearing into his soul. Naturally, it was the same for Long Bai. There was a difference, however. The Crimson Destruction Dragon God had been unable to break free because he had allowed the Nirvana Devil Soul to invade his soul domain. Still, the pain should be enough to keep the Dragon Monarch occupied for a short while. Long Bai hurriedly withdrew his dragon soul, but the pain inflicted by the Devil Soul wouldn't disappear immediately. Just the same, he couldn't regather the draconic willpower and energy he let crumble instantly. The debilitation would only last a couple of breaths, but it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that the Devil Queen had created. "Seal him now!" The 9 witches who had been waiting to execute this order from the very start immediately took off to their positions. Jai Xin, Jai Ling, Yi Li, Yao Dai, Qing Ying, Lan Ting, Hua Jin, Yu Wu, and Channy. The 9 witches began shining like 9 dreamlike butterflies with eerie black marks engraved into the space around them. The black marks crisscrossed around Long Bai's body. Soon, a gigantic, sealed dark profound formation came into existence around him. When the dark profound formation took form completely, a devil's shadow appeared inside the profound formation and let out a roar that seemed to hail from the ancient abyss. The formation was called the 9 Tribulations Heaven-Sealing Formation. It was an ancient devil formation the heaven-smiting devil emperor had left behind for Yun Qi, which he then taught to the 9 witches. Since the 9 witches were created by Kai Waiao, their minds were interlinked, and their power came from the same origin. Most people of the current world would be hard-pressed to master the ancient devil formation left behind by the heaven-smiting devil emperor herself. But thanks to Yun Qi's eternal calamity of darkness and the special connection between the witches, they were able to learn it in just 4 months. The 9 tribulations sealed not the body, but the power. Long Bai's draconic energy was somewhat chaotic due to all the damage he had taken so far, but the ancient formation also caused it to weaken at a drastic rate. After his pain faded and his consciousness grew clearer, Long Bai discovered in astonishment that his control over his own power was slipping. It was as if his divine powers were immobilized by countless threads. In the end, even the white energy surrounding his body all this time had dissipated completely. Kaianai, Guzhu, Keijia, Kang Shishin, suppress him with everything you got. Yan 3, Yama Emperor Yan Wu, give all your powers to Yan 1. The order jolted everyone into action. The 6 level 10 divine masters, Kaianai Wugu, Kaianai Bingzhu, Guzhu, Kaianai Yinger, Keijia, and Kang Shishin, fired their energies into Long Bai's unprotected body. Boom crack. Without the layer of white energy, Long Bai's terrifying physical body was only as strong as a normal dragon god's. The 6 pillars of energy immediately bent his gigantic body like a broken twig, and the following noise sounded like cracks of thunder. He had to have at least broken 1,000 bones at the same time. Boom, Long Bai crashed to the ground so hard that he bounced back into the air. While this was going on, Xianxia, Yan 3 and Yan Wu were standing around Yan 1 and pressing their palms against his body. They poured every bit of Yama Devil energy they possessed into his profound veins. All 4 people shared the same origin of power and even the same blood. Naturally, the transference of power was as smooth as it could possibly be. The black mist surrounding Yan 1's body grew as thick as the infinite nights, and his withered arm looked filled to the point of bursting. When Long Bai bounced into the air, Yan 1 had been gathering his power for at least 1.5 breaths. Yan 1 locked his gaze on the Dragon Monarch's stomach, his old, half-narrowed eyes gleaming with a kind of malice that could terrorize even the evil spirits of hell. He abruptly thrust his swollen right arm forward and fired a pitch-black, claw-shaped energy that tore space and law itself apart straight at Long Bai. Jai-ah-dai! Bang! It was a soft sound, but it was one that caused everyone's eyes to widen and every heart to stop. The white scales around the Dragon Monarch's stomach only resisted for an instant before falling apart like cloth. The devilish claw of darkness penetrated his 30,000-meter-long body, burst out from his back, and ended his legend of invincibility once and for all. The sky turned red from dragon's blood for an instant. The northern region profound practitioners froze for a second, before feeling a rush of blood to their heads and cheering like crazy. Unfortunately, the cheering only lasted a breath before a shattering noise chased it away completely. The 5 venerable withered dragons were so strong that the deep-sea barrier at 70% of its strength didn't even last 15 minutes. Waiao's upraised hand froze in midair before she gave the softest of sighs. In the end, it had all been for nothing. Long Bai's strength had exceeded even her greatest estimates, and this was especially true of his draconic body. It was so strong that it surpassed all of the records regarding the dragon god race. Even if that was the case, there had definitely been a chance that they could have killed him with their powers combined if the deep-sea barrier had lasted for 30 more minutes. This was fate. They had given it their best shot, but it had not been enough to decide the outcome. Amidst the shattered fragments of the barrier, the 8 dragon gods formed the tip of the spear as all of the western divine region's divine masters rushed in. The world seemed to flip upside down in a single instant, as the entire deep-sea divine region was violently constricted by an incredibly terrifying field of energy. The power of the 8 dragon gods and 5 withered venerable dragons exploded into the enemy formation, swiftly smashing apart the 9 tribulations heaven-sealing formation. Long Bai's body suddenly started spinning in midair as he began to glow. He swiftly transformed within that white light as he resumed human form and quickly retreated under the protection of the venerable withered dragons. He gave a dragon cry in an incredibly deep and grim voice, "Charge!" At nearly the same time, Kai Waiao shouted the exact same word on the northern divine region's side. "Charge!" Rumble. Blades left their sheaths with a steely rasp as profound light erupted all over the battlefield. Anyone who was peering at the 10 directions deep-sea realm from distant star regions would have thought that countless stars had exploded over the deep-sea divine region. "Charge!" A bloodthirsty howl rang out from the northern divine region's troops. A cold and sinister killing intent caused the temperature in the air to plummet and made it seem like the heavens and the earth had started to shiver. There were no probing attacks or words exchanged, as both sides charged forward without hesitation. In fact, Attacks were being randomly hurled toward the respective armies without any specific target. It seemed like countless powder kegs had exploded the moment the barrier shattered as darkness, roars, explosions, and fresh blood explosively pulled back the curtains on this most terrible of battles. In an instant, countless arrows of blood shot through the sky as space warped and collapsed all around the battlefield. Charge! 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 Tianguhu, who had been waiting in the wings all this while, finally charged out with all of the divine masters of the northern divine region's upper star realms in tow. His eyes had turned as red as blood, and a deafening roar escaped his lips. It wasn't easy for us to even come this far, so if you don't at least take someone else with you, you'll have died a dog's death. Charge! Rumble, rumble. The heavens and earth shuddered violently as malice soared up into the sky. The forces of the Western Divine Region overwhelmingly outnumbered the forces of the Northern Divine Region at every level. As the ground started to grow wet with blood, every Northern Divine Region Divine Master had to face off against at least two others of their level. However, they refused to be intimidated or bullied by the Western Divine Region despite the difference in power. There wasn't a single speck of fear in their eyes as they faced off against their enemies, only frenzy and malice. And this actually caused the numerically superior Western Divine Region Divine Masters to flinch backwards as they fought. Long Bai's figure retreated away from the morass of blood and violence under the protection of the venerable withered dragons. His face was calm but grim, and there was a bloody hole that was about half a palm wide that had been punched through his chest. His left arm held his severed right limb and slowly placed it back in place. After that, a layer of white light slowly started moving over his body. Under that white light, all of the wounds on his body were mending themselves at a rate visible to the eye. Furthermore, even his severed right arm, while still pale, had started to regain a bit of health and vigor. "Help me," he said in a deep voice. The venerable withered dragons nodded their heads as 5 withered hands pressed down on his body. The blood flowing from the hole in his chest immediately stopped, and after about a dozen short breaths, Long Bai's chaotic and uneven energy had started to regulate itself. After another dozen breaths, the holes in his chest and back had been covered by white light before they slowly started shrinking. This terrifying recovery speed could practically be compared to Yun Qi's. "Is this light profound energy?" Long Yi asked as suspicion flashed through his eyes. "No," Long Wu said as he shook his head. "It is hard for the body of the Dragon Monarch to be compatible with light profound energy. This is something that has been bestowed upon him by a unique external power. To think that 300,000 years of refining could produce results as astonishing as this." When Long Wu went into divine hibernation, Xianxia had already appeared in the Dragon God realm. Long Bai remained quiet throughout the entire process, his eyes coldly focused on the battlefield. Yun Qi's aura still hadn't appeared even once. The opposing side did not have their ace, the beating heart of their forces, so it was undoubtedly making this calamitous battle even easier. However, Long Bai didn't feel a single shred of joy in his heart. He felt as if the volcano of infinite rage that had been churning in his heart was being suffocated and suppressed. If Yun Qi wasn't around, what had been the point of rousing the venerable withered dragons or using the world Dragon City? "Do we take action?" Long San asked. "There's no need for that," Long Si said in a calm voice. The Moon Eaters, Yama Devils, Brahma Kings, Witches, Star Gods, and the Dragon Sovereigns of Absolute Beginning were clashing head-to-head with the high-level Divine Masters of the Western Divine Region's 6 King Realms, but the difference in numbers was overwhelming. As such, they were already on the back foot when the battle had begun. But since the only alternative to victory was death, invisible fires had ignited in these hearts. Hearts which had resolved themselves to death as they burned their powers and wills to the fullest extent. Ra! The sea gods of the 10 Directions deep sea realm had been retreating, but the gradual collapse of their divine region caused their eyes to swiftly become clouded with bloody mist as the shock and fear in their hearts swiftly transformed into hate. This fucking Western Divine Region, the 10 Directions deep sea realm is going to be destroyed. Destroyed! A sea god roared in despair. He rushed forward like a wild beast that had suddenly been roused from its slumber and sent a Kai dragon that had been fighting the heavenly jade star god flying. The actions of the first sea god had been enough to shatter the fear and hesitance of the rest. All of them gritted their teeth fiercely as they rushed forward. In that instant, it seemed as if the Western Divine Region and death weren't that scary after all. As for those who were at the 10th level of the Divine Master realm, The ones who had entered this exalted and unsurpassed realm of power had already found their own opponents. The Kilin Emperor stood in front of Kaianai Wugu and Kaianai Bingju, and 4 Ink Killins who were also level 10 divine masters stood behind him. Cries of misery reverberated through the air as the battle raged on, but the space around these 7 individuals seemed to be strangely quiet and tranquil. The Kilin Emperor made a small bow. "Old friends, it's been far too long." Kaianai Wugu let out an empathic sigh. "We haven't met for nearly 100,000 years, but you're still so hale and hearty. I must say that I'm absolutely jealous of you." The Kilin Emperor shook his head with a dry chuckle before he asked, "Since I received news of your return, I've always been deeply curious about one thing. Why did you two choose to throw your lot in with the darkness?" Kaianai Bingju replied, "Since we have already experienced life and death, we thought that seeing another side of the world and another possibility wasn't a bad choice at all. Furthermore, this is as our God Emperor wills, and that is all," Kaianai Wugu added on. "Ah, so that is how it is," the Kilin Emperor said as understanding seemed to dawn on his face. He stretched out his big hand and the quiet space around them instantly shattered. Vast might slowly swelled forth from his body as he said, "Since our viewpoints are different this time, let's just enjoy this battle." The 2 Brahma ancestors engaged in battle with the 5 mighty Killins. "Everyone get out of my way." Even though the powers that were clashing on this battlefield were at the apex of this universe, an astonishingly incredible draconic might still swept through it unimpeded as the Crimson Destruction Dragon God rushed toward Kai Waiao. The hate that burned in his eyes was so dense that it was almost tangible. "Devil Queen!" The Crimson Destruction Dragon God's voice seemed to explode out of his body as he gave a bone-rattling roar. "Today I will personally tear you to shreds." "Oh, just you alone." Kai Waiao gracefully wiped away the blood that had trickled down her lips with her long and slender fingers. Her voice turned languid and cottony as she purred. "Aren't you afraid that you'll end up looking even more pathetic than the last time? I have always been very cruel to any little worm who isn't one of my pets." "H-hey." The Crimson Destruction Dragon God gave another explosive roar, one so loud that it instantly caused the ears of the 3 dragon sovereigns nearest to him to bleed. His eyes turned scarlet as his arms explosively swelled to several times their original size. All of the energy in his body raged and churned like a million volcanoes that were about to erupt. "Big brother, let me help you," the White Rainbow Dragon God said. "Get lost. No one is to interfere with my battle." All of the rage and draconic energy in the Crimson Destruction Dragon God's body seemed to explode at the same time as he rushed straight at Kai Waiao. The White Rainbow Dragon God's lips twitched for a few moments before he rushed Yan 3, who was already engaged in a fierce battle with the Cyan Abyss Dragon God. Jai Xin and Jai Ling were rushing toward the Devil Queen when the figures of 2 dragon gods descended in front of them to block their path. It was the Pure Dragon God and the Purple River Dragon God. They were the ones who scratched your face the last time. The Purple River Dragon God's voice was alluring and silky, and her expression was seductively charming. Unfortunately, her seductiveness was a whole level lower than Kai Waiao's, whose devilish charm could ensnare a person's heart in a single instant. "HMPH," the Pure Dragon God gave a soft snort of disdain. "That truly is a grave and unforgivable sin." The Purple River Dragon God narrowed her eyes as a smile appeared on her face. She stretched her arm out, her long nails glinting with a heart-piercingly cold light. "Then let me help you. Rip them apart." Jai Xin and Jai Ling were like 2 halves of a mirror, and even though their auras were being fiercely suppressed by the 2 dragon gods, the black light in their eyes was still as gloomy and deep as the abyss. On the other side, the Cyan Abyss Dragon God and the White Rainbow Dragon God were battling Yan 3, while Yan 1 was busy fighting the Jade Dragon God, the Sky Dragon God, and the Myriad Manifestations God Emperor. The 2 great Yama ancestors had ignited all of their Yama devil blood, and they let out sinister and dreadful wails from time to time. Kang Shishin was in even more trouble, though. His opponents were the Blue Dragon Emperor and her Blue Dragon Divine Attendants. "I must say, little Blue Dragon." Kang Shishin grinned as a flowing blue light appeared on both his arms. "To think that a woman needs to bring along helpers when dueling with a man. This isn't too appropriate, is it?" The Blue Dragon Emperor didn't even bother to reply. Instead, she gave a light wave of her hand, instantly turning the world around her into a blue ocean which trapped Kang Shishin within. The 2 people standing in front of Kaianai Yinger and Gu Zhu were 2 of the great god emperors of the Western Divine region. the Kai Dragon Emperor and the Hui Dragon Emperor. Even though Kai dragons and Hui dragons were not the equal of the dragon gods, their draconic body still allowed them to reign above all else. Kaianai Yinger and Gu Zhu would already be hard-pressed to take on one of these two great dragon emperors by themselves, but facing two of them was a gamble they had to stake their lives on. The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning was battling the Azure Dragon God, while the injured Yan Xianxia and his Yama Devils were battling two level 10 Divine Master Kai Dragons and one level 10 Divine Master Hui Dragon. However, there was still a deep worry resounding in their hearts. Those 5 dreadful, venerable, withered dragons had not made their move yet. Rumble. A single downward sweep of Xianxia's heavenly wolf sword had severed the spine of a dragon sovereign. As it fell to the ground, Xianxia used her spiritual sense to sweep the battlefield in search of more enemies. It was at this time that she detected Zhou Yuzi's aura. In that instant, her eyes widened into saucers as a shocking blackish-blue light erupted from the heavenly wolf eyes set into her devilish sword. B-O-O-O. Heavenly thunder seemed to explode in the air as the power in the heavenly wolf sword swelled and gathered. As she grew near to her target, the huge image of the heavenly wolf cut through layers of space and smashed into Zhou Yuzi's body. Zhou Yuzi's body suddenly spun, and the horsetail whisk in his hand made the lightest of movements. A soft sound rang in the air as the image of the heavenly wolf changed its trajectory and brushed past him. However, Xianxia had already appeared in the air above Zhou Yuzi, and her devil sword streaked down on him like a falling meteor. Zhou Yuzi didn't move a single inch as 6 beams of white light shot up above him and fiercely blocked Xianxia's sword might. It was the last 6 guardians of the eternal heaven god realm. Zhou Yuzi once again drew a casual line in the air with his horsetail whisk. A white light flashed as the sound of a bell tolled in the air for a long period of time. Bang! Xianxia gave a muffled groan as she was sent flying. However, her body came to a forced halt in the very next instant. Her heavenly wolf sword let out a blood-curdling howl as she sent it hurtling down with her slender arm. One girl and her sword faced off against Zhou Yuzi and his 6 great guardians alone. She didn't utter a single word. In fact, the only thing radiating from her right now was never-ending hatred. The eternal heaven-divine realm. Hugh! Yun Qi opened his eyes and let out a long breath. This was much easier than it was the last time. The stars in Shui Meiyan's eyes started to glow with undisguised adoration as she crowed, "Big brother Yun Qi, you're way too awesome. Once you've completely mastered something, controlling it will soon become natural and easy," Yun Ched replied with a faint smile. "It looks like we won't even need 3 weeks. I shouldn't experience any difficulty or feel any strain on my next try." "Yeah," Shui Meiyan gave a heavy nod of her head. She sat down beside Yun Qi and opened her mouth as if to say something. You want to tell me something?" Yun Qi asked as he gave her a sidelong glance. There is another secret that I think Big Brother Yun Qi should finally know about. Just treat it as your prize for working so hard." She was still hesitant at first, but it had transformed into a happy smile by the time she said those words. Because she knew that the words that she was about to say would definitely cause Yun Qi to leap in joy. "You've actually still kept a secret from me?" Yun Qi's eyes widened into saucers as a dissatisfied look appeared on his face. He reached out with both hands to grasp Shui Meiyan's face. "Hurry up and tell me. Hurry up and tell me." "Woo, then Big Brother Yun Qi, you need to prepare your heart first, okay?" Shui Meiyan let him rub her face as she giggled in glee. Okay, now that he had regained the blue pole star and cried his heart out, he couldn't think of any other news that could shake his soul. Shui Meiyan sucked in a tiny breath before slowly replying, "Your master is still alive." Shui Meiyan said those words. Yun Qi suddenly shot to his feet without any warning. He remained standing there with a wooden expression on his face. As he slowly turned his head towards her, his neck seemed to become incredibly rigid, and his movements grew exceptionally stiff. "Which master are you talking about?" "Master Xuanian," Shui Meiyan answered with a very sincere and serious expression as she stared straight into his eyes. Yun Qi's eyes trembled violently, and he felt as if someone had just swung a sledgehammer into his heart. He pressed his hand against his chest in a futile attempt to suppress his wildly beating heart as he muttered in an absent-minded voice, "No, it's not possible. She's already. When the blue pole star had been destroyed, his one scant comfort was that he had not personally witnessed the deaths of his family, lovers, and friends. However, Mu Xuanian had died in his embrace, and he had personally felt the last trace of life escape her body, before he buried her in the heavenly netherfrost lake with his own 2 hands. So how could she be? Shui Meiyin hugged Yun-Chi's arm and whispered to him in a very soft voice, "I know just how important Master Xuanian is to big brother Yun-Chi, so I definitely wouldn't joke about such a thing." Yun-Chi turned to stare at her dumbly with blank eyes. "Master Xuanian's survival isn't just a guess of mine, and it definitely isn't just some rumor that I heard." She paused for a moment, and her head dipped a little. "It's something I have seen with my own 2 eyes." Yun-Chi felt as if his heart was about to leap out of his chest as his body became as still as a statue. Her appearance and that ice phoenix aura that only she has, I wouldn't mistake her for someone else, Shui Meiyin said. Furthermore, her ice phoenix profound energy and soul energy have become far stronger than back when she was alive. It practically seems as if she has gone through some sort of wondrous rebirth. Actually, she nearly discovered my presence, and I would definitely have been caught if I didn't have the world piercer on me. In order to confirm her status, I paid a special visit to the Snow Song realm to infiltrate the heavenly Netherfrost lake. Even though I couldn't descend into its depths, my divine senses were able to sweep the entire lake, and I couldn't sense the existence of her body. That was definitely your Master Xuanian. Furthermore, the reason she has remained hidden thus far is probably because she has the same worries that I did, that her presence would distract you from your determination to take revenge. Yun-Chi's eyes were still dazed. He desperately wanted to believe those words with all of his might, and there was no way that Shui Meiyin would lie to him about this, but she clearly, in my arms, he muttered in a dispirited voice. There are times that the things that you personally see and experience lead you to a false ending. Shui Meiyin stared at him as her starry eyes trembled. Just like back when Big Brother Yun-Chi died in the Star God realm. All of the Star Gods witnessed your death, but in the end you still appeared again, hale and whole, as you re-entered my life. Yun-Chi's heart pounded violently as his back stiffened. Wait a minute. I only managed to come back to life because of the Nirvana flames that the Phoenix spirit bestowed upon me back then. Phoenix, the Ice Phoenix divine being that had possessed Mu Xuanian. Compensation. Could the Ice Phoenix divine being have the same reincarnation ability as the Phoenix divine spirit? The Ice Phoenix divine being inside of the heavenly Netherfrost lake was no mere soul fragment. She was the true ancient Ice Phoenix of old. Furthermore, the soul she used to possess, Mu Xuanian, was naturally her origin spirit. When he had been at the bottom of the heavenly Netherfrost lake with her, the Ice Phoenix divine being had told him the complete truth, and he had sensed a deep guilt in her heart. After she bid him farewell, the Ice Phoenix divine being, who still had part of her divine powers left, dissipated into motes of energy even though she could have continued to exist for a long time after that. If the Ice Phoenix had the same reincarnation ability as the Phoenix. If the reason for the Ice Phoenix divine being's dissipation had been because she had bestowed the last of her origin power on Mu Xuanian as compensation. Then, the anxiety, hesitation, and disbelief in his heart quickly morphed into burning flames as Yun-Chi's breathing became more and more violent. He suddenly recalled something as he hurriedly took out the Southern Sea Divine Pearl. I can't be wrong, it's her. It's her. Yun-Chi's hands tightened over the pearl as his lips started to twitch violently. His eyes quickly misted over as he said, I should have realized it. I should have realized it. That person had thrown the Southern Sea Divine Pearl toward him and instantly vanished from his spiritual senses in spite of the distance. The only person in the universe who could accomplish that feat was Mu Xuanian. Only her, the reincarnation ability he had inherited had been bestowed by a mere soul fragment of the Phoenix. Even though it had resurrected him, it had not been able to revive his powers as well, which resulted in him becoming a cripple. However, Mu Xuanian possessed the Ice Phoenix divine being's origin soul and origin power. So this resurrection would only have made her stronger. This was what had happened. This was definitely what had happened. She wasn't dead. His master, his Xuanian, was still alive. She had been watching over him and helping him all this time. Yun-Chi gently pressed the Southern Sea Divine Pearl against his chest and held it there for a very long time. It seemed as if the deep sea divine region was being filled with heavenly lightning and magma at every single instant. Rip, rip, re-ip. On the eastern borders of the battlefield, the divine sovereigns of the northern divine region and 10 directions deep sea realm were activating all sorts of attack-based profound artifacts to aid in the battle. That terrifying sound of space being torn had come from an attack unleashed by the 10 directions deep sea realm's giant glazed glass bow. Even though the giant glazed glass bow was far inferior to the southern sea god realm's titanic sea god cannon, it was still a king realm's guardian artifact. Its power was naturally extraordinary as well. Every glazed glass bolt released from its string could split space apart and penetrate the body of a master dragon at the very least. The dragons of absolute beginning had carved out a gigantic defensive line in front of them. However, there were simply too many master dragons from the dragon god race, and they were at a higher level of power than the dragons of absolute beginning. Even though a bunch of upper star realms from the northern divine region joined in the fierce defense, it only took 15 minutes for the master dragons to punch several holes in this defensive line. A large number of master dragons surged toward the backlines as their tails and claws left bloody trails of light and miserable wails in their wake. One prepared darkness profound formation after another was activated as they trapped and wounded dozens of master dragons. However, the bodies of the dragon god race were simply far too powerful, and most of the master dragons escaped those traps in less than a single breath. Even the dreadful-looking wounds on their bodies didn't do much to sap their draconic might. As they roared out in rage and pain, they proceeded to unleash calamitous destruction on the battlefield. Divine sovereigns were too tiny and insignificant in front of the master dragons. The severed arms and heads of the northern divine region's profound practitioners flew into the sky, as the collapsing deep-sea divine region was swiftly dyed with blood that radiated darkness. "You bastards!" Tianguhu roared as his eyes bulged out of his sockets. Among those divine sovereigns were the young profound practitioners who were also a part of the northern region heavenly sovereign ranking like him. They had been moved and led by him, and they were the northern divine region's future, the most brilliant lights of its youngest generation. However, they were currently falling, one after another, as the cruel claws of these dragons sliced them apart. Unfortunately, he was currently being completely suppressed by two divine Master Kai dragons, so he had no way to extricate himself from this fight. The only thing he could do was to let out blood-filled roars of rage, as the darkness profound energy circulating around his body, and sword grew more and more sinister and frenzied. He hated that he couldn't simply ram his sword through their hearts, as his attacks grew more and more reckless. Two gigantic dragons were violently clashing in the middle of the battlefield. Now that he faced off against the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning, the Azure Dragon God had also revealed his true form. However, the superiority of his race and bloodline still wasn't able to completely bridge the gap between him and the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning. "Us dragon gods have always regarded your race as ancient kin who lived abroad, and we have never once offended you. So why are you helping these devils in their tyranny?" the Azure Dragon God bellowed. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A dragon god faced off against a dragon emperor, and every collision of their bodies caused the heavens and earth to violently shudder. "We each have our own destinies to fulfill. There's no need for any more words." ROA. A roar of rage shook the heavens and the earth. Under this vast and enormous power that seemed to come from the ancient past, the Azure Dragon God's draconic energy collapsed as his enormous body crashed into the ground, creating a long and gigantic ravine with his body. He let out a furious howl as his body instantly rose up from the ground. However, he did not rush towards the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning again. Instead, his enormous tail, which was filled with his dragon god power, snaked after a star god aura that he had detected. He sent it crashing down on the heavenly jade star god who was behind him. The heavenly jade star god had been battling two mighty dragon sovereigns by herself, and she had already been pushed dozens of kilometers back. Shock suddenly filled her heart as she sensed the extremely terrifying might bearing down on her from above. She immediately tried her best to break away from the suppression of the two dragon sovereigns, but she couldn't defend against or dodge the Azure Dragon God's mighty blow. Boom! The Azure Dragon God's tail smashed the heavenly jade star god right in the back, causing her body to instantly bend around it as an arrow of blood erupted from her mouth and flew several hundred meters. Her eyes instantly grew glassy and blank after that dreadful strike. The claws of the two mighty dragon sovereigns swept down at this moment, aimed straight for her back. "Sis!" the heavenly demon star god cried out in shock as he swiftly backpedaled. Bang! A dragon claw landed heavily on his back, gouging out bloody furrows in his flesh. His face went white, but he borrowed the power of the strike to rush toward the falling heavenly jade star god, as his pupils shrank to pinpoints. His speed far exceeded anything he had ever achieved before. Finally, at the last possible moment, he fell in front of the heavenly jade star god's back and desperately used all of his power to shield her. Boom! The dreadfully powerful strikes of the two mighty dragon sovereigns slammed into his back. The cruel sound of bone breaking reverberated in the air as his spine was snapped in two. Blood gushed out of the heavenly demon star god's mouth. However, the two dragon sovereigns he had been tangled up with caught up with him at that moment, and the power of two more level 8 divine masters bore down on his broken and tattered back with enormous force, dispelling the last bits of light from his eyes. RRR. The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning gave a furious roar as he arrived on the scene and blasted all 4 dragon sovereigns away with a violent storm. It was also at this moment that the Azure Dragon rushed toward him ferociously, as both gigantic dragons once again became embroiled in a calamitous battle of earth-shaking proportions. The heavenly jade star god swiftly regained consciousness, and she hurriedly flipped around to hug the heavenly demon star god tightly. In an instant, her hands became dyed red in fresh blood, and his aura, which was already faint and swiftly fading away, caused her fingers to tremble crazily. Sis, the heavenly demon star god opened his mouth to utter the last word he would ever say in his life. After that, he took one last look at his beloved sister before he peacefully closed his eyes. Being able to die in his sister's embrace was perhaps the greatest comfort to the heavenly demon star god. Drip, drip. Thick droplets of blood continued to drip from his body as it stained the heavenly jade star god's clothes and watered the broken ground. See, the heavenly jade star god muttered. She raised her head to look at the sky, 2 streaks of blood slowly running down the corners of her eyes while she stared blankly into space. Woo-wash. A storm howled around her, causing her blood-stained hair to dance in the wind. Those 4 great dragon sovereigns had returned to finish the job. Rose, she softly whispered, I will still be your big sister in the next life, but next time it'll be my turn to protect you. As she hugged the body of the heavenly demon star god tightly, she closed her eyes and rose to her feet. Her body hunched over slightly, and she exploded toward those 4 dragon sovereigns, a dazzling white starlight suddenly erupting from her body. Her speed started to dramatically increase as that starlight grew denser and denser. From the distance, it looked as if a brilliant star was dying as it streaked towards the earth. The Heavenly Sun Star God, Heavenly Flame Star God, Heavenly Soul Star God, and Heavenly Charm Star God immediately sensed this sudden change. All of them twisted around and let out the same heart-rending cry. Aster, don't do it! Keijai also turned around at this moment, and she gritted her teeth violently when she witnessed what was happening. That was the Star Ash's ability. PFFFBOO. A star fell and boundless starlight erupted from it, enough to dye the sky a lustrous white. 4 miserable cries rang out from the center of that starlight. 3 dragon sovereigns were sent flying, blood spraying wildly from their bodies. As for the dragon sovereign that had been directly hit by that starlight, that incredibly strong and sturdy dragon body was currently missing both its head and its chest as it startled to tumble to the ground. Meanwhile, Aster and Rose's star god bodies began to disperse into fragments of light, melting into the starlight that filled the sky. This fierce battle had finally caused the death of a star god. Keijai fists tightened even further, and the malice and hatred in her eyes started to rage violently. Besides her big sister, the people she had been closest to within the 12 star gods had been Aster and Rose. In fact, one of the reasons why she had appeared to stop the other 6 star gods from reinforcing the eternal heaven god realm was because of these siblings. Now, the 12 star gods, whose brilliant light had once awed the world, had dwindled to only 5. The heavenly wolf resolves herself to death. The heavenly sun star god, heavenly flame star god, heavenly soul star god, and heavenly charm star god, all 4 star gods let out wails filled with pain and sorrow. At this time, all of them saw the bitter and tragic end that was awaiting them. They knew that the once dazzling star gods were about to forever be consigned to the history books in their era. Their chests swelled up with energy, to the point where it looked like they were going to burst, as all of the power within their bodies started burning with rage and hatred. At this moment, all of them had gone completely berserk, and their star god power was erupting with a strange starlight that was more frenzied than they had ever been in their lives. This frenzied star god power poured out of their bodies like a flood as they swept away everything in front of them. The starlight in Xianxia's eyes had disappeared, and only a boundless, gloomy darkness remained. Her aura turned even more wrathful as her sword energy became even fiercer and sharper. The resentful howls of the heavenly wolf reverberating throughout the souls of every person on this terrible battlefield. Long Er's gaze rested on Xianxia's figure for a very long time before he gave an emphatic sigh. To think that the heavenly wolf of this generation was actually so incredible. Not even 30 years of age? Even someone like Long could scarcely believe what his own eyes and senses were telling him. A pity that she fell so deeply into devildom, a pity. Long San sighed as he shook his head. In less than a decade, an incredibly short amount of time, Xianxia had grown from the 7th level of the Divine Master realm to the 10th. The speed of her growth and awakening far exceeded the last heavenly wolf, Zissou, and in truth, it had surpassed that of every star god in the history of the star god realm. If she was given sufficient time, she would definitely become the strongest star god in the history of the star god realm. Unfortunately, she was still too young, and it was hard for her to fight against Zhou Ziuzi, who had tens of thousands of years' worth of built-up power and profound energy. What's more, she still had 6 eternal heaven guardians to deal with. The devilish wolf howled to the heavens as her sword streaked through the air like a calamitous meteor. Xianxia broke through the energy seals of each guardian as a single heavenly star lamentation suppressed 50 kilometers of space around her into a terrifying S shape and howled straight for Zhou Ziuzi's head. There was only Zhou Ziuzi's figure in her eyes right now. She might very well be destined to die in this place today, but before that, she had to rip Zhou Ziuzi into 1,000 pieces, no matter the cost. Zhou Ziuzi retreated a few steps as his right arm whipped out, causing the horsetail whisk in his hand to splay out wide. The space that was being twisted by the heavenly wolf swords might suddenly twisted back toward Xianxia as it violently distorted her sword energy. Rumble, the space on both sides of Zhou Ziuzi was completely destroyed, but only a strong wind reached where he was standing. It was also at this moment that the 6 guardians who had been forced away chose to attack in unison. Xianxia's attack had been bold and reckless, and she hadn't left an escape route for herself if it failed. 3 beams of white light and 3 sword beams struck her center mass and blasted her far away. As she spun through the air, her rainbow robes quickly turned red with blood. She didn't even bother to look at the injuries she had sustained, whether they were internal or external. Instead, the devilish malice of the heavenly wolf sword once again filled the skies as the heavenly wolf let loose a furious howl and smashed the sword down at Zhou Ziuzi's head. There had never been a battle as vicious and terrible as this in the entire history of the God realm. In every part of the southern divine region, countless star realms and planets had started to shudder and tremble. In fact, the star realms that were near the 10 Directions deep sea realm had already started to collapse from the terrible shock waves emanating from this battle. The level of a person's power would dictate how much they knew about this battle. The high-level, profound practitioners in the neighboring star realms had already started to flee in panic 12 hours ago. However, countless ordinary profound practitioners did not think that the battle in the distant 10 Directions deep sea realm would affect their star realms. So less than half of them were able to escape with their lives when the backlash came. Every pair of eyes in the Eastern Divine Region, Western Divine Region, and Southern Divine Region was now directed toward the 10 Directions deep sea realm. This battle, which had erupted out of nowhere, turned out to be a battle of divine regions that far exceeded even their wildest imaginations. Everyone's heart was beating wildly in fear and anticipation as they waited for it to end. Nearly all of them were convinced that their hopes would be realized, and that the Western Divine Region would utterly destroy the invading devils, rescue the Eastern Divine Region and Southern Divine Region from their crises, and end this dark threat forever. In most cases, it was very hard for a person to die once they entered the Divine Master realm. However, when a battle consisted only of Divine Masters, even their hardy bodies would be torn asunder as their blood watered the land. Rumble, space was shredded apart like thin sheets of paper as 3 eternal heaven guardians vomited blood while they were blasted away by Xianxia's attack. Xianxia herself was flung far away like a butterfly caught up in a storm. Zhou Ziuzi's white hair started dancing wildly in the air, and his voice was like the tolling of a deep bell as he said, "How astonishing! To think that you've reached such heights in these short few years. However, since you have fallen onto the path of devildom, I cannot spare you. HMPH, a tiny heavenly wolf like you wants to kill our Lord. You must be dreaming." The guardian who was fiercely guarding Zhou Yuzi's right flank snarled. Keijai stopped her body from being flung around by the storm. She pointed her sword into the sky and raised it high in the air. Streams of blood slowly flowed around her hands, a sight that would cause even the most heartless person to wince. The sky suddenly darkened as a huge blood-colored moon suddenly appeared behind her back. A towering azure wolf stood in the middle of that moon, and its eyes were like a scarlet prison of blood. Its mouth yawned open, as if it was about to swallow the heavens before it let out a low howl that threatened to shatter the souls of everyone present. The 6 guardians, who were about to pounce toward Keijai, suddenly stopped in their tracks. The blood moon and that terrifying wolf caused their eyes to shake in fear and anxiety. "Oh!" The gazes of all 5 venerable withered dragons turned to look at Keijai. "The immortal slaying sword formation," Longya said as he fixed his gaze on Keijai once more. "Let me see just how powerful this young wolf's immortal slaying sword formation is." "Heh, this young wolf is only young when age," Long chimed in. "Just based on her current power alone, she has already far outstripped all of the heavenly wolf star gods I have ever known." "The immortal slaying sword formation," a guardian gasped in a quavery voice. "The heavenly wolf's 6th sword style, the blood moon immortal slaying sword." Even though he had never personally had to endure this attack before, how could anyone able to become a guardian be unaware of it? It was only when he gasped those words that he realized, to his utmost shock, that his teeth were chattering when he said them. The way their souls currently trembled told them that this was a tyrannical attack that they had no hope of defending against. Keijai's eyes were as dark and gloomy as the deepest abyss, and they were filled with boundless hatred and resentment. The bloody light of her ominous moon shone in the shocked and frightened eyes of the 6 guardians as they watched her arms slowly descend. "Awhoo!" The howl of the heavenly wolf filled the air as its gigantic figure descended from the skies. That pair of furious eyes seemed to be bloody purgatories in which countless souls had been burned to death. "Get out of the way!" Zhou Yuzi roared. However, he advanced instead of retreating, and as he faced off against that blood moon and that gigantic azure wolf, he spread his arms wide, causing an ancient bronze-colored bell to materialize in front of him. The ancient bell was only about 10 feet in length when it first appeared. But as the white light radiating from Zhou Yuzi's arms crazily poured into it, it started to rapidly swell. In an instant, it became 100 feet, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet long. The mouth of the bell, which now looked as deep as an abyss, plummeted toward the blood moon and the giant azure wolf. "The armillary bell," Long Wu muttered as he raised his head to look at the weapon. "Boom!" As a deafening explosion that seemed to swallow up both the heavens and the earth rang through the air, the sword might of the immortal slaying sword formation erupted. The gigantic figure of the azure wolf shattered and transformed into thousands of blood-colored sword beams. Every single one of these sword beams contained enough destructive force to split apart the heavens and the earth, but none of them exploded toward Zhou Yuzi or his guardians. Instead, they were all sucked into the armillary bell. The sounds of destruction continued for a full 5 breaths. The armillary bell shuddered violently as the booming sounds deafened the ears of countless divine masters for a short period of time. Near the end of the explosions, the ancient bell even started to gradually bend out of shape. Crack! A terrifying explosion filled the air as a crack suddenly appeared on the armillary bell. The crack instantly spread throughout the body of the bell, but it was also at that moment that the explosions finally ceased. The image of the azure wolf had completely dissipated, and the blood moon behind Keijai had disappeared as well. She stared blankly at the armillary bell as both her arms sank heavily, and a look of exhaustion appeared in her eyes. Her delicate head started to droop, and droplets of blood formed streams as they flowed down her arms that were as white and lustrous as jade. The blood flowed down onto her sword and started to drip from the tip of its blade. The armillary bell swiftly shrank and returned to Zhou Yuzi's palm. As he looked at the cracks on the surface of the bell, a look of pain flashed through his old eyes. Then he gave a sigh filled with sorrow as he put it away. "Sigh." Long San gave a soft sigh, almost as if in pity and regret. "It's too bad for the young wolf. If Zhou Yuzi didn't have the armillary bell, he would have lost at least an arm. It is such a pity that her attack didn't work," Long Si said as he shook his head. The 5 great venerable withered dragons had not attacked even once. Instead, they behaved like neutral observers whose jobs were to comment on the fights breaking out across the battlefield. This was because they felt like the battle had already been settled, and there was no need for them to intervene. The look in Longya's eyes suddenly changed. It was also at this moment that the expressions of the other venerable withered dragons, and even Long Bai himself, changed dramatically. All of them stared at Keijai with puzzled looks in their eyes. "It looks like you've about reached your limit," Zhou Yuzi said as he slowly walked forward. But before he could say another word, his entire body froze in place. All of the sounds that were buzzing around him suddenly disappeared. The sound of people yelling, the sound of dragons roaring, the sound of energy exploding, and the sound of bodies being ripped apart. All of it had vanished without a trace. In fact, it was as if Zhou Yuzi had slipped into some sort of strange space where even time itself had been frozen. The distant figures, the clouds of blood, the flying fragments of dust and rock, all of these things had been frozen in a strange, silent tranquility. Everything around him soon started to blur together in this dreadful tranquility. This continued until everything vanished from his eyes and he was thrust into a strange, blank world. That was until the pitch-black figure of a wolf appeared in this world. The wolf wasn't too big, and if it raised its head to the sky, it would only be about the same height as Keijai. It slowly padded toward Zhou Yuzi, its eyes like a pair of bloody purgatories. However, Zhou Yuzi could see his image being reflected all too clearly in those scarlet eyes. After that, the wolf clenched its jaw before letting out a low and despairing whimper through its gritted fangs. Thump, thump, thump. Zhou Yuzi couldn't tell if that was the sound of his heart beating or if it was the sound of that devilish wolf's heart. "Zhou Su Zai," a young girl's voice rang in his ears, but at the same time it also seemed to sound like the howl of a devilish wolf. "Even if I have to burn my body and shatter my soul, I will definitely kill you." Hatred and resentment. There were no words that could describe this sort of hatred and resentment. Zhou Yuzi's entire body went ice cold, and he soon couldn't even feel that cold as his body turned numb. The devilish wolf was padding closer and closer until it finally rushed at him. It opened its mouth wide, and every single one of its fangs seemed to glint with a black and bloody cold light. Those fangs swiftly grew enormous in his sight as the wolf closed in on him. However, he could not move. He could not even muster up a single sound. The only thing he could vaguely hear was the sound of his guardians desperately shouting at him. Keijai, whose head had remained drooped all this while, finally raised it to look at him. She once again held the heavenly wolf sword aloft as she softly muttered a few words. "Earth grieves, heavens wounded, solely hatred without heart." As she muttered those words, the heavenly wolf sword casually swung in Zhou Yuzi's direction. A black sword beam that looked like the most basic attack in the world shot out from it. In that instant, the terrible battlefield fell into a sudden hush. The figure of a black heavenly wolf suddenly appeared in the hearts and souls of everyone on the battlefield. It was dyed in blood, and its body was wrapped in black chains as it clambered up from a hellish abyss. It opened its jaws wide enough to swallow the heavens and bit down at Zhou Yuzi with boundless hatred and resentment. "My lord! My lord!" The root and attribute of the heavenly wolf's divine power was hatred and resentment. Right now, Keijai's boundless hatred and resentment was locked onto Zhou Yuzi alone. This dreadful hatred and devilish might have weighed down on him so heavily that it had locked him into a state of paralysis and stupor. As the sword beam bore down on him, his 6 guardians let out desperate screams as they rushed forward, their eternal heaven-divine power heavily exploding against that sword beam of dark energy. Rip, with a tearing sound so soft that it could barely be heard, the black sword beam sheared through the energy and body of the first guardian like a hot knife through butter. Rip. The same soft, tearing sound rang out once again as the black sword beam tore through the body of the second guardian. That guardian hardly felt any pain, and he could not even tell that his body had been cut in half. Rip, the third. Re-yip, the fourth. Re-yip, the fifth. The might of the black sword beam finally seemed to weaken, and the eternal heaven-divine power of the 6th guardian managed to stop it for half a second before it flew right through him as well. This time it hadn't cut through the guardian so cleanly, and a cloud of blood burst out of the 6th guardian as the sword beam passed through him. It had only taken an instant, a single instant, for 6 mighty guardians to be cut in half by a single sword beam. When the sword beam finally reached Zhou Yuzi, the body of the first guardian had just barely begun to separate in two. In Zhou Yuzi's mind, the fangs of that dark devil wolf had just about reached his throat, but he still couldn't move. The only thing he could do right now was to wallow in despair. Roar. An earth-shaking dragon roar reverberated in the air and violently shook Zhou Yuzi's soul. allowing his consciousness to abruptly escape the prison of hatred created by that black heavenly wolf. Unfortunately, the black sword beam was already about to hit him, so he could only raise his arms to block it. When the dragon cry rang out, a draconic aura also burst forth and swiftly morphed into the pale white figure of a dragon. The energy dragon then proceeded to collide head-to-head with that dark sword beam. Longyi. Now that the heavenly wolf had used her legendary seventh sword style, he had finally made a move as well. Bang! The energy dragon collided with that beam of solid darkness, profound energy, and a dragon cry filled with rage, sorrow, and resentment instantly split the sky. The energy dragon that Longyi had unleashed was dragged back by the waist before the sword beam punched clean through its body. The dark sword beam now only contained about 20% of its initial might as it smashed into Xianxia, who was already circulating defensive profound energy. AWHO? The heavenly wolf howled to the sky once more, but this time that howl did not only contain devilish might and hatred, it also contained a trace of desolate sorrow. When the last bit of dark sword energy exploded over Xianxia's body, the blood of a god emperor sprayed through the air. A slash that stretched nearly 2 feet diagonally appeared across his torso, and the cut was so deep that his bones could be seen through the spraying blood. Fortunately for him, it was not powerful enough to cut him in half and end his life. Xianxia recoiled in panic as he pressed his hand against his chest. A low groan of pain escaped from his lips, and his soul was still shaking with fear. Longyi's hand was frozen in midair, and his ancient eyes were trembling with a shock that he simply couldn't shake off. After she looked at the wound that she had dealt to Xianxia, the last bit of light in Xianxia's eyes completely faded, and they turned a murky black. Her arm powerlessly fell to her side, and the heavenly wolf sword slipped from her hand and started to fall to the ground. She felt as if her body had become incredibly light, so light that she could barely even sense her own existence. She closed her eyes and allowed the cold wind to blow her away as she fell into a deep abyss of darkness and despair. The world had turned completely gray along with her swiftly fading consciousness. She couldn't even hear the rushing sound of the wind as she fell toward the ground. I couldn't kill Xianxia, nor could I kill Xianxia. In the end, I wasn't able to do anything. Big brother, I'm sorry. Big sister, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yun Qi's figure appeared in that dim and gray world of hers, and he brought a world of mountain flowers and green forests along with him. What's your name? Name, oh, let me think. Orange, apple, hawthorn, peach, papaya, lychee, big mushroom, little mushroom, ant, elephant, camellia, jasmine. Ah, I got it. My name is Jasmine. Little miss, even if you want to lie, you shouldn't be so obvious. Then it's decided my name shall be Little Jasmine. What the this, what how is this different? Of course it's different. Little Jasmine sounds even cuter. That's right, Jasmine is my wife. Wow, so it's like this, eh? Jasmine is Big Brother's wife, so Little Jasmine should be Big Brother's. Little sister-in-law. If that's the case, then Big Brother is my brother-in-law? Greetings, brother-in-law. When they had first met, she had played him like a fiddle, and the wild and exasperated look in his eyes every time she frustrated him was the most beautiful and important of memories that had accompanied her during the gloomy darkness of the last few years. If only time had been frozen in that period. How nice would that have been? Xianxia swiftly sealed his own wound, and when he lifted his head, the first thing he saw was his 6 guardians, and the terrible scene of the last 6 guardians of the eternal heaven god realm being cut in 2. A single stroke of the sword had cut down 6 guardians. Xianxia's attack had already become incredible enough to be recorded in the annals of the god realm as a feat that would deeply shock 1,000 generations. However, it had not been enough to kill Xianxia. Tai Han, Tai Zi. Xianxia extended a hand, but the only thing he caught was the energy that was still bleeding out of their bodies. The severed bodies of the 6 guardians powerlessly fell from the sky, and all of them wore stunned and frustrated expressions on their faces. It was as if they couldn't believe that they, the mighty guardians of the eternal heaven god realm, had died just like this. Now, all of the cornerstones which had supported the eternal heaven god realm, the eternal heaven guardians, companions who had accompanied him for countless years, had fallen. Xianxia closed his eyes in sorrow. He suddenly felt as if he was the only person in this vast and boundless world, and endless loneliness and sorrow filled his heart. Even if he successfully took his revenge, even if the devils were all destroyed, would the eternal heaven god realm truly still have a future? His eyes snapped open, and a dark and sinister killing intent zoomed in on the distant Keijai. As he stared at her body falling toward the ground, the white horsetail whisk was instantly sucked back into his hand, an incredibly frenzied and agitated eternal heaven-divine power swiftly gathering within it. Kai Wao's spiritual senses were so vast that she could clearly observe the rest of the battlefield, even though she was currently engaged in a fierce battle with the Crimson Destruction Dragon God. Alarm filled her heart, but the Crimson Destruction Dragon God's frenzied attacks didn't give her room to breathe, much less concentrate on interfering with Zhou Zuzi's actions. The only thing she could do was to shout out anxiously, "Save Keijai. You should worry about yourself first." The Crimson Destruction Dragon God snarled as his eyes practically popped out of their sockets. As he slashed down with his thick and brutish arms, two claw marks that were hundreds of meters long were torn through the air, completely engulfing Kai Waiao in a domain of draconic destruction. "Little princess," the four remaining star gods yelled in unison. Each of them were facing at least two opponents of their level, and they were barely holding on as it was. Any distractions would only increase the peril they were already in, and there was no way they could extricate themselves from their fights to save Keijai. Black devilish light erupted from Kaina Yinger's hand, as she met the huge draconic energy contained within the fist of the Kai Dragon Emperor with her own blow. If Yun Qi was around, she could perhaps just barely manage to take on the Kai Dragon Emperor on her own. However, she knew that she wouldn't be able to hold out for too long in his absence. Kai Waiao's anxious cry rang in her ears, and her spiritual senses sensed the eternal Heaven God Emperor's erupting killing intent and Keijai's dissipated aura. A dense white light started to radiate from the eternal Heaven God Emperor's body as a sinister malice, so great that he had only felt something like it a few times in his life, flashed through his eyes. His horsetail whisk swished through the air, and dozens of white energy beams, surrounded by needle-shaped fragments of space, appeared and shot toward Keijai with venomous force. Boom! Kaina Yinger, who was already on the back foot, suddenly forcibly diverted her energy, and the draconic might of the Kai Dragon Emperor smashed her right in the center of her chest. In the next instant, blood gushed out of Kaina Yinger's mouth. Her body was racked by such intense pain that she felt like it was going to shatter, but she still spun in midair and forcefully regathered the darkness profound energy that had just been dispersed and launched her body towards Keijai. The Kai Dragon Emperor paused for a single instant before he immediately gave chase, his claw shooting straight for Kaina Yinger's back. However, a withered and ancient figure suddenly blurred into existence in front of him. Bang! The claw of the Kai Dragon Emperor slammed straight into Gu Zhu, while the power of the Hui Dragon Emperor slammed into him at the same time. The dreadful draconic power of the two mighty Dragon God Emperors mercilessly hammered into every part of Gu Zhu's body. Yet he didn't even shift a single centimeter, and his expression remained as tranquil as the water at the bottom of an ancient well. On the other side, the Myriad Manifestations God Emperor was battling Yan-One together with the Jade Dragon God and the Sky Dragon God. However, to his utter surprise and frustration, he simply couldn't gain the upper hand in this fight. Shock and alarm grew in his heart as the fight grew more and more frenetic. Yan-One's attacks were growing wilder by the second, and he kept letting out shrill cries that threatened to rupture both his heart and his eardrums. He was already regretting choosing this opponent. To think that he, a God Emperor, couldn't get an advantage over his opponent, even though he was working with two dragon gods. No matter who the enemy was, this was still an incredibly humiliating thing for him to experience. It was at this time that he spied Kaina Yinger shooting through the air from the corner of his eye. When he saw the blood spraying from her mouth and realized that she was trying to save the heavenly wolf star god, a sinister thought flashed in his mind. He broke away from Yan-One's Yamadevil power and made a sudden turn, the gray sword in his hand erupting with the dense and brilliant power of his Myriad Manifestations bloodline as it streaked towards Kaina Yinger. Bang! A gray figure materialized in front of him as the Myriad Manifestation God Emperor's gray sword strangely switched targets and struck an old man instead. When the sword slid through his body, his Myriad Manifestation divine power violently erupted within. At nearly the exact same instant, the Kai Dragon Emperor and the Hui Dragon Emperor were also drawn in by him, almost as if their souls had been bewitched into doing so. The powers of the three mighty God Emperors of the Western Divine Region exploded all over Gu Zhu's body at the same time. Boom! Any single one of these three god emperors could destroy stars with a single flick of their fingers. Even so, Gu Zhu's body still did not even rock under their attacks. He was clearly a small and withered old man, and his body had even become a little bent and crooked. But at this moment, it seemed as if he had become a most sturdy and unbreakable wall as he stubbornly guarded Xianxia Yinger's back. He remained defiant even though he was facing off against three mighty god emperors at the same time. Xianxia Yinger had transformed into a streaking comet as her speed reached its limit. Keijai was growing closer and closer, but Zhou Zuzi's killing beams of white light had almost reached her as well. She snarled silently as she flung an arm out, the divine oracle snapping forward like a striking snake. It instantly stretched across dozens of kilometers as it exceeded the speed of those beams of eternal heaven-divine power and wrapped itself around Keijai. After that, she violently flung her in the direction of the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning. Crack! Eternal heaven-divine power exploded over the space that Keijai had been in just an instant earlier. A white scar that stretched over 5 kilometers was torn into space as a storm of destruction raged over the area like 1,000 heavenly calamities. Boom! The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning let out an explosive roar as he fiercely smashed the Azure Dragon God's head into the ground with a swipe of his gigantic claws. However, he did not take the opportunity to deal a critical strike. He soared into the heavens and opened his mouth wide, causing a storm to fly toward Keijai. The winds gently wrapped around Keijai and pulled her toward the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning before carefully depositing her on top of his head. Then he securely wrapped her in his own protective draconic energy. The annihilation of the last eternal heaven guardians had clearly caused Zhou Zuzi to lose his composure. His power descended from the sky as he charged at the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning. His teeth clenched so hard that they looked like they were about to break. However, a golden figure blurred into existence in front of him, and the divine oracle transformed into a venomous snake that shot straight at his heart. He had been severely wounded by Keijai's previous sword slash, and his aura had grown disordered due to his anxious wrath, so Zhou Zuzi was easily pushed back by Xianxia Yinger. Blood trickled down the corner of Xianxia Yinger's mouth. There was a wound on her chest, but her attacks were still ruthless and severe. Black devil energy swirled around the divine oracle as it sliced open one black scar after another on Zhou Zuzi's body. Bang! The divine oracle knocked aside his white horsetail whisk from an extremely bizarre angle, causing Zhou Zuzi to stumble backwards. The divine oracle immediately darted out once more and struck Zhou Zuzi in the same place he had been wounded before. A dense black light exploded on Zhou Zuzi's chest as his broken bones and ravaged flesh were instantly dyed a frightening scorched black. Zhou Zuzi swiftly backpedaled as pain racked his body. Xianxia Yinger was just about to give chase when her heart suddenly shuddered, and she immediately turned around to discover the cause. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The Kai Dragon Emperor, the Hui Dragon Emperor, and the myriad manifestations God Emperor. The power of these three mighty god emperors crazily poured down on Gu Zhu's body, and every single blow of their dreadful god emperor might struck him like a bolt of earth-shaking heavenly lightning. However, Gu Zhu didn't move a single muscle as he bodily endured all of their blows like an ancient bell, which remained pristine and unrusted even after an eternity had passed. Perhaps he had sensed Xianxia Yinger looking at him. But Gu Zhu's eyes finally rippled as a surprisingly powerful beam of white light erupted from his body with no warning at all. As the white beam struck the three mighty god emperors, it was as if a million hammers had smashed into their bodies and blasted them far away. They stared at Gu Zhu with a look of puzzled shock as their numb arms started to throb with pain. Uncle Gu, Xianxia Yinger felt her heart tighten in her chest, and for a moment she couldn't even breathe. "You're fine, right?" Blood soundlessly flowed from Gu Zhu's mouth, nose, ears, and eyes, but he continued to keep his back facing Xianxia Yinger. He did not want her to see him in this state. "Miss," he breathed out that word in a soft whisper. His voice was as calm and composed as it always was, but it sounded as fragile as an ancient leaf trembling in the wind. "I will no longer be able to serve at your side after today, so you must." Before he could even finish, his withered body, which had been standing proud and erect just a moment ago, crumpled forward as he plummeted to the ground. "Uncle Gu!" Xianxia Yinger unwittingly cried out in alarm as she rushed forward at her fastest speed, however. She had traveled too far from him during her duel with Zhou Zuzi. By the time she finally arrived, she could only watch Gu Zhu's body smash into the ground right in front of her. Xianxia Yinger fell to her knees, and it was only now that she saw that Gu Zhu's body had been completely dyed in fresh blood. It was so ravaged that it looked like a piece of rotten wood that had been battered by storm winds for 1,000 years. His aura had already become so weak and thin that even a gentle breeze could blow it away. Xianxia Yinger's palm froze in midair, her jade fingers trembling. She did not even dare to touch him. She clenched her teeth in sorrow as tears started to fall from her eyes. To her, Gu Zhu was both her teacher and her father. When her own birth father had decided to discard her, it had been Gu Zhu who rescued her from Xianxia Fanshan's hands without any regard for the consequences of his actions. When she had returned after falling into devildom, he was also the one who had stood by her side without a single shred of hesitation, no matter what her status or situation was. And now, he had used his own body to block the attacks of 3 mighty god emperors for her. For more than half of Gu Zhu's life, he had been controlled by the Brahma soul death-wishing mark. He had been the first successful experimental subject that Xianxia Wugu had created with the primordial seal of life and death. He had gained an incredibly long lifespan because of that. However, his life force had also grown incredibly weak as a consequence, even in spite of the fact that his cultivation had reached the 10th level of the Divine Master realm. Tears landed on Gu Zhu's withered hand, causing his lips to gently twitch up into a small smile. However, it was a smile that seemed to be filled with boundless peace and joy. To think that Miss would actually shed tears for this old slave. "Miss, you've really changed, heh, heh, heh." That faint smile froze on his ancient face as all life left him. Xianxia had already regained consciousness atop the head of the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning. She stared at Xianxia Yinger, who was currently kneeling in front of Gu Zhu's body, with a complicated look in her starry eyes. The Kai Dragon Emperor stared at his own palm before giving a cold snort. That old man's power was truly strange. Could it be because of the primordial seal of life and death that the Dragon Monarch spoke of? "He's already a dead man, so there's no need to bother," the Hui Dragon Emperor said as he stared at Xianxia Yinger. "I heard that this Brahma Monarch goddess is currently the closest person to the Devil Master Yun Qi. She is also the new master of the Brahma Monarch God realm. We can't let her live. There's no need for any pity. Let's give her a quick death. Attack!" The myriad manifestation God Emperor shouted as the gray sword in his hand started to glow with a dense light. The 3 mighty God Emperors attacked once again, and after their bodies started to move, an incredibly dreadful energy vortex started to spin towards Xianxia Yinger. Xianxia Yinger did not immediately move to dodge the attack. In fact, she did not even turn around to face it. She slowly stood up as she gritted her jade teeth grimly. Her entire body started to shake, and when the 3 god emperors of the West neared her, she suddenly jerked her delicate head up high and let out a shrill scream of despairing determination. Boom! An incomparably sinister and bizarre field of darkness energy exploded out of her body. Whoa! The bodies of the 3 god emperors of the Western Di-Ivan region suddenly froze once they were caught in this field of darkness energy. After that, they all let out muffled groans as they were blasted far away. In the West, Long Bai and the Venerable withered dragons instantly and violently turned to look in her direction, their eyes glowing with shock and surprise. The look on Kai Wao's face dramatically changed as well, and she yelled in an anxious voice, "Xianxia, don't be impulsive. Don't forget what we discussed before." However, even Kai Wao's voice was not able to stop Xianxia Yinger. Dark devilish runes swiftly started to spread across her body from the center of her chest. They covered her body, her limbs, and her face. They even covered the tip of every finger and toe. These runes transformed her beautiful golden eyes into a bottomless abyss, and dyed her flying golden hair into the deep black of a boundless night sky. The hearts of every northern divine region profound practitioner on this battlefield started to leap wildly in their chests as their blood violently tossed and turned inside of them. Even the darkness profound energy erupting from their bodies had started to become frenzied. It was a resonance of darkness. The dark aura that covered the battlefield at this moment was one that neared that of the Devil Master himself. As the 3 god emperors of the Western divine region stared at her with dumbfounded eyes, Xianxia Yinger slowly turned around, her devil rune-covered face both bewitching and lovely. The divine oracle, which she was still holding in her hand, lost all of its golden luster as it started to shine with an incomparably pure black light. For the first time, Xianxia Yinger had completely released the drop of Devil Emperor blood that circulated inside of her body without caring about any of the consequences. Wao let out a quiet sigh in her heart. The next moment, her devilish pupils turned as determined as a cornered person who had abandoned all hope. Qianai Yinger didn't say a word. There was only hatred and killing intent in her pitch-black eyes. She had absorbed the Devil Emperor's blood with Yun Qi's assistance. It was why her darkness, profound energy had grown much faster than normal. However, she was a mortal, not a monster like Yun Qi. She didn't know the consequences of burning the Devil Emperor's blood completely and unleashing all of its power, nor did she want to. All she knew was that her body was overflowing with so much unstable darkness, profound energy, that it could tear her apart at any moment. She stepped forward and swung the pitch-black divine oracle. What was a pitch-black spirit snake a moment ago was now a massive boa. Her darkness, profound energy was a violent fire that devoured all the light within its vicinity. The god emperors of the Western divine region were knowledgeable and wise, so they knew that Qianai Yinger's current aura and attack were anything but natural. The god emperors dodged. No one was foolish enough to block the hit directly. However, the weapon moved much faster than expected because the darkness, profound energy empowering it was out of control. Its speed was like bone gangrene, as it shot straight toward the myriad god emperor's throat despite his best efforts. Energy swirled around the myriad god emperor as he spun around. He crossed his sword in front of himself to block the weapon. There was a shrill noise of impact as the divine oracle clashed against the myriad emperor's sword. Incredibly, the dark light emitting from the divine oracle burned his face and body directly as if his protective aura didn't exist at all. After he used the impact to push himself away to safety, he took a look at his sword and was shocked by what he saw. The weapon had accompanied him for tens of thousands of years, and for the first time ever there was a pitch-black dent on its blade. He shouted in warning, "Don't touch her! Ugh!" His shout turned into a groan of pain because the divine oracle he knocked away just a moment ago suddenly whipped toward him again in an unnatural fashion. His quick reflexes saved him from having his head smashed like a watermelon, but he still suffered a deep wound to his forehead. "What?" exclaimed the Kai Dragon Emperor and Hui Dragon Emperor in unison. They were going to approach Qianai Yinger until they saw this. The god emperors of the Western divine region possessed the strongest protective energy in the world as a matter of course. It took an incredible amount of effort just to break their defenses, much less injure their bodies. However, Qianai Yinger's rampaging darkness, profound energy had torn through the myriad god emperor's protective aura like paper. It was the heaven-smiting devil emperor's origin blood after all. The power one gained from burning it was a power that almost transcended the limits of this plane. At the very least, it wasn't something a god emperor could defend against. It could only last for a very short time, and the price was probably worse for the burner themselves than it was the enemy. In the best-case scenario, Qianai Yinger might be weakened for a couple of years. In the worst-case scenario, her cultivation could be permanently impaired. "Wait until she runs out of power," Long Bai ordered in a low tone. It was too late, though. A chorus of blood-curdling screams cut through the air right after he finished. The new divine oracle possessed an unnaturally wide attack range. The three god emperors managed to escape after withdrawing at full speed, but the four divine master Kai dragons behind Qianai Yinger weren't so lucky. Shred. The darkness coiled like a serpent, shredding three master dragons into pieces and killing a dragon sovereign who tried to block it with his arm. The dragon sovereign had probably believed that the arm of a dragon god would be strong enough to block the attack. Instead, he lost both the limb and his heart in an instant. The scene terrified the three great god emperors of the Western divine region and drove them to fly away in three different directions, determined to avoid Qianai Yinger at all cost. It was the right move. Everyone knew that it was only a matter of time before Qianai Yinger burned out completely. Long Er's eyes shone darkly as draconic energy surged around him. Then, one arm swirling with ancient draconic energy, he swooped down on Qianai Yinger so fast that he left an afterimage behind. Finally, one of the 5 venerable withered dragons had decided to take action against the unnaturally powerful Qianai Yinger. His draconic pressure was so terrifying that it shook everyone's heart and even the world itself. Qianai Wugu was fighting against the Qilin God Emperor when this happened. The former abruptly forced the Qilin God Emperor away with a palm strike and teleported straight for Long Er. The Qilin God Emperor stretched out his arms, but withdrew his power after a moment's consideration. Then he turned to face Kyanai Bingju. The Brahma ancestor was currently battling against his 4 ink killins. I am aware that my strength is no match for you, old friend. I hope you don't mind me working together with my subjects to subdue you. Hee, Kyanai Bingju chuckled a little. It is the honor of my life to be able to do battle against 5 great killins at once. My only wish is that my broken body won't crumble too soon. Rumble, a golden sun erupted in the sky of 10 directions deep sea realm and stopped Long by force. Slowly, the venerable withered dragon turned to face his attacker. Kyanai Wugu knew he had to go all out if he were to have any chance of holding back Long. Thus, he ignited all of his Brahma blood, released all of his Brahma soul, and summoned the golden image of a Brahma emperor across his entire body. Even his eyes and skin were dyed gold in color. Your fellow resurrector, Brahma Emperor Kyanai Wugu, wishes to test the might of a venerable withered dragon. HMPH. His heart was ancient, but his pride as a dragon god was still present. Long replied indifferently, "You do not qualify." Kyanai Wugu simply responded by pushing out his palm and flooding the sky with golden light. He was aware that he was no match for the venerable withered dragon, but equally, Long would not be able to defeat him in a short time. The entrance of a venerable withered dragon was without a doubt hail to the snow that was their predicament. While Kyanai Yinger was suppressing 3 god emperors all by herself, how much longer could she maintain her current state? On the other side, Zhou Ziuzi was staring daggers at the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning's giant form. The Guardian's deaths had more or less extinguished his final hope of having a future for eternal heaven. All he had left in him was hatred and sorrow. Not even bothering to heal himself, he flew alone toward the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning. The Dragon Emperor was already hard-pressed to protect Keijai and do battle against the Azure Dragon God at the same time, and now, a hateful eternal heaven god emperor had just joined the battle. When it sensed the blast of divine energy behind his back, the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning let out an angry roar, enveloped Keijai's body with half of his draconic energy, and tried to stop a dragon god and a god emperor with the remaining half of his power. The Dragon Emperor's absolute loyalty toward Keijai was an artificial emotion the heaven-smiting devil emperor had forced upon the creature. However, it was still unshakable and incorruptible by any emotion. There was a loud bang, and the Dragon Emperor was sent staggering a couple kilometers away from the point of impact. Before he could recover, the Azure Dragon God and Zhou Ziuzi appeared like lightning and landed a second blow. The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning could fight both the Azure Dragon God and Zhou Ziuzi and maintain a stalemate for a very long time. However, protecting Keijai was its top priority right now. Nothing was more important than this duty. Zhou Ziuzi focusing all his attacks on Keijai made things even worse. No matter which angle the God Emperor came from, it always ended with the Keijai atop its head. The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning had no choice but to expose himself again and again to the Azure Dragon God's attacks to protect her. Roar! The Dragon Emperor let out a furious, helpless roar as the Azure Dragon God tore thousands of blood-drenched scales from its body and smashed it heavily against the ground. Finally, the Dragon Emperor could no longer maintain its protective energy and Keijai flew far, far away, heading for the ground. The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning roared even angrier, but a grayish-blue shadow smashed into its spine and bent its body like a V before it could crawl back to its feet. On the other hand, Zhou Ziuzi ignored the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning entirely and flew straight at Keijai. Eyes brimming with hatred and fingers bent like an eagle's talons, he made a grab for the girl's head. All 4 star gods, Heavenly Flame, Heavenly Sun, Heavenly Soul, and Heavenly Charm, sensed the danger at once and looked at her. "Princess!" The battle between the Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning and the Azure Dragon God was unapproachable and took up an enormous amount of space. Now that the Dragon Emperor was suppressed by the Azure Dragon God, there was no one left to save Keijai. In that moment, without exchanging any word or thought with anyone at all, they listened to the blood of the star god inside their veins and arrived at the same grim determination. Right now, all 4 star gods were covered in blood and wounds. Normally speaking, they would be hard-pressed to defend themselves, much less break free from their opponents and fly to Keijai's rescue. Unless... H-H-H-H-H-H? A chorus of horrific screams suddenly shattered the air. At the same time, the 4 star gods erupted like blazing stars. The supernova-like explosions threw the dragon sovereigns who had been suppressing, in some cases, even bullying them far, far away. With speed surpassing even the fastest meteor, 4 starlights cut through air and space and flew straight for Xianxia and Xianxia. Xianxia looked up slowly. The most brilliant starlight in the world flooded her dazed pupils. "Little princess," the heavenly flame star god's warm, peaceful voice entered her ears. "We know that our sins are unforgivable. This is the only way we can atone for some of it. This is our final gift to you. You can't dislike it, okay?" said the heavenly charm star god lovingly and forlornly. The heavenly flame star god was the first to arrive. He was moving so fast, and his pressure so immobilizing that Xianxia had no way of avoiding him. The only thing he could do was cross his arms and gather enough strength to distort the space in front of him. Rumble! There was an explosion of starlight, and the heavenly flame star god returned to ashes just like that. Not even Xianxia could withstand the supernova that surpassed the power of a star god. The god emperor instantly bled from all his orifices and rolled across the sky like a tumbleweed. Before he could recover himself, another 2 starlights closed in on him in the same manner. Xianxia had been a god emperor for tens of thousands of years, so he was able to react very quickly. He forced himself to swallow the gurgling blood in his throat, summoned the cracked armillary bell, and channeled all of his power into the divine artifact. It immediately swelled to 3,000 meters and flew toward the heavenly sun and the heavenly soul. Kaboom! The light generated from the explosion nearly blinded Xianxia's eyes, but filled Xianxia's eyes and soul with warmth. The armillary bell distorted drastically, and the crack Xianxia dealt earlier widened at an incredible rate. Then a boom that felt like the fall of heaven itself later. The remaining starlight hit Xianxia square in the solar plexus, drilled horrifying holes into his already severely injured body, and crushed his organs to the point where they shifted out of place. Xianxia hit the ground heavily and threw up blood non-stop. It was at this moment the heavenly wolf devil sword flew back into Xianxia's hands. The wolf's head at the sword tip also reopened its vengeful, bloody eyes. She slowly rose to her feet. Somehow, she was able to dig up a reservoir of dark heavenly wolf divine power from her small, exhausted body. She wobbled into the air and flew toward Xianxia. She then let out a low, hateful growl and swung her sword at the kneeling god emperor. Xianxia abruptly looked up and caught the sword with both hands, keeping it at bay. Xianxia's pupils were dark and vengeful. The wolf behind her was flickering but violent. Even as weakened as she was, the force behind her sword was still something to behold. Xianxia bled from his palms, and his arms were slowly but surely giving in under the pressure. However, he was able to gather his strength eventually and push back against Xianxia. Unfortunately for him, the breather only lasted half a breath's time. His widened pupils shrank into the size of a needle because one final starlight was approaching him at high speed. Immobilized by the heavenly wolf's power, Xianxia could only watch the starlight of despair fly closer and closer to him. Boom! The star turned into a supernova, destroying Xianxia's last protective aura and spraying his blood everywhere. However, not only did the explosion not harm Xianxia in the slightest, the girl felt like someone was pressing her cheeks with a warm hand. A tear slid soundlessly across her cheeks, and the brilliant starlight eventually faded into nothing. Xianxia brought her sword down. Of the 12 star gods, the heavenly wolf was the only one left now. Kaboom! This time, Xianxia had nothing left to defend himself. His chest cavity crumpled beneath the swing, and at least half of his chest bones and ribs shattered at the same time. Red peeking between the black in her eyes like the blood stains of the abyss. An exhausted Xianxia somehow summoned a power that could only be described as fueled by infinite hatred and swung her sword again and again. Boom, Xianxia's right arm was shattered. Boom, Xianxia's left arm was shattered, and the force was so great that it literally ripped chunks of flesh from his body. Boom, Xianxia's legs and knees turned to dust. Boom, this one struck Xianxia's skull and turned his world into a nightmarish buzz. Boom, the final strike pierced his broken body completely and scattered his dirtied blood across the field like a burst blood bag. Bang, Xianxia collapsed to the ground like a dying dog, unmoving. However, his eyelids were still trembling, and there was a wisp of aura that struggled like a dying fish on shore. The end of the devil race was happening right before his eyes, and he refused to die until he witnessed its end. At the same time, the heavenly wolf devil sword crashed into the ground and made a noise that sounded like crumbling mountains. Eyes gray and unfocused, Keijai slumped against her sword and just barely kept herself from dropping to a full kneeling position. She could sense that a wisp of Zhou Zuzi's aura was still struggling to live, and she wanted nothing more than to get back to her feet and end it once and for all. However, her arms, no, her entire body no longer felt like they belonged to herself, and even keeping her eyes open nearly depleted all of her strength and willpower. Sis, I'm so tired, I really don't have anything left anymore, bang. A dreamlike murmur later, still slumped against the heavenly wolf devil sword, her consciousness finally faded into complete darkness. Long Bai had been watching everything. He hadn't tried to save Zhou Zuzi or kill the unconscious Keijai with his own hands. It was beneath him. Azure, he said indifferently, kill that little heavenly wolf, but make sure you preserve the body. It would make an excellent gift for when he met Yunqi later. He hadn't given the order via sound transmission, so everyone heard his words clearly. Roar. The Dragon Emperor of Absolute Beginning let out a roar of absolute fury and frustration. A violent storm of energy immediately shattered much of the Azure Dragon God's bones and knocked him high into the air. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to transform the opportunity into a chance to crush the Azure Dragon God once and for all. It was because the 9 dragon sovereigns who were battling the 4-star gods earlier had rushed over to stall it for as long as they were able. Eager to carry out the Dragon Monarch's order, the Azure Dragon God forced himself to return to an upright position before flying toward Keijai. Behind him, the Dragon Emperor's roars grew a decibel louder. Yama Emperor Kainying, Kai Weiao shouted. However, Yan Xianxia was busy defending himself, and Kaianai Yinger had lost half of her mind after burning the devil's blood. She hadn't reacted to the roar at all. Kai Weiao abruptly descended toward the ground, but the Crimson Destruction Dragon God wasn't going to let her escape as a matter of course. A crimson domain that seemed to burn with infinite flames abruptly appeared from his body, and he shouted, "You will not escape. Devil Queen." Suddenly, Kai Weiao stopped and turned to face Long Fei. Her eyes were gleaming with a demonic light. Kai Weiao once said that anyone whose soul had been feasted upon by her devil soul before, even if it was the Crimson Destruction Dragon God himself, would be traumatized by the experience. She had claimed that he wouldn't be able to face her without fear until a very, very long time later. She was correct. Even now, the fear was twisting inside his pride like a malicious snake. It was why he had sworn to destroy her, the source of his fear and shame, with his own 2 hands. Now, after he saw the all-too-familiar gleam in her eyes, the Crimson Destruction Dragon God immediately and instinctively protected his dragon's soul. He looked like a bird who was scared by the twang of a bow. It was at this moment a blue gleam of space appeared less than 30 meters away behind the Crimson Destruction Dragon God and pierced into his neck. It had happened all too suddenly and unexpected. There was zero sign whatsoever until it happened. Forget the others, even Long Fei himself didn't notice it despite being so close to the ambusher. There had only been 30 meters of distance between Long Fei and the strange reaction, not to mention that his attention had been fully focused on Kai Weiao. It had come as a complete surprise. Even better, the cold beam of power had pierced through the supposedly impenetrable body of a dragon god with ease. Ding! A ring of ice sealed the Crimson Destruction Dragon God's power before he could gather it. Ding! A second ring of ice sealed all the veins on his upper body. Ding! A third rice of ice pushed down his second attempt to channel his power again, and ding, 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 ding. It began from the wound in his neck, and it ended up with everything being encased in ice. A total of 18 rings of ice had frozen his power, his blood, his veins, his bones, his profound veins, his consciousness, his limbs, and more so fast that those who weren't facing the scene didn't even have time to turn their heads. The Crimson Destruction Dragon God had been frozen into ice before he was able to react or put up any meaningful resistance at all. Then, bang, the sword sang again and the rings exploded. The frozen Crimson Destruction Dragon God, the physical body that was second in power only to Long Bai, shattered into a shower of dreamlike bluish fragments. The blue figure who did all this wasn't done yet, however. They cut through space with impossible speed and brought their sword toward the Azure Dragon God next. Everything had happened in just an instant. No one was anywhere near fast enough to cry out in warning. By the time the Azure Dragon God turned around in shock, all he saw was the Crimson Destruction Dragon God shattering into a million pieces, and a blue light that was just inches away from his head. Bang, the Snow Princess sword struck the Azure Dragon god squarely in the forehead and erupted into a 1,000-meter expanse of ice.